Beyond Bitcoin Hangouts are meant to give everyone a voice, a chance to speak with others who are passionate advocates for expanding the blockchain's use cases out into the world and beyond. Do you have a crypto community you would like to represent and hold open Hangouts for? If so, you might find yourself on the path to owning a stake in Beyond Bitcoin. We are looking for people who care about people who want to bring others together, because crypto communities are people. Beyond Bitcoin is a movement of thinkers and doers in the crypto space. And if you feel you are one of them, reach out to beyondbitcoin@gmail.com for more information on how to debut your community's efforts to reach to the stars and beyond. Welcome everybody to another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. Today is Friday, September 9th, 2016. As always, we're joined by a bunch of people who think about cryptocurrency and blockchain technology nonstop throughout their days, weeks, minutes, seconds. And a lot of these people have projects that they would like to build and try to bring to the ecosystem. Now, everybody knows that these are experiments, if they're honest with each other. Now, not everybody is in crypto, but it seems like most of the people who come to these hangouts are very interested in being transparent about the development of such projects and forming a community that wants to actually show that it's part of that project. So I wanted to bring on various people and give them the ability to get into these hangouts to talk about their projects, but I didn't want to make it too easy. We want to make it a lower barrier to entry, but also make it so people have to work to have a community that backs them. So in the early days of Steem, we have the system where people can RSVP. When the RSVP thread is posted after the Hangouts, every day after the Hangout, the RSVP thread for next week will be up. And you can go and RSVP there. And if you have a bunch of people who trust you and think that you are doing amazing things, ask them to comment on your post, ask them to upvote it, and ask their friends to upvote it. Utilize the network that you have. The people who are starting early doing this, you can see that they're already starting to gain significant advantage from this. Now, with that said, today we're going to be getting started with Peerplays at 2791 with 48 upvotes. So they have obviously lobbied people and asked them to consider upvoting them, and they are going to be covered today, and some updates by Data Security Node and Crypto Prometheus. If anybody else wants to RSVP or support them, make sure to upvote them whenever they post to these Hangout threads. So with that said, are you guys available and ready to talk?
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jonathon Bahai. I am the president of Bunker Chain Labs, the company which is heading up the Peerplays project. And this week's update is primarily all about legal, because when it comes to crypto projects, there is no shortage of issues surrounding legal matters and whatnot, especially in terms of what Peerplays is going forward with. So this past week, we've really been working hard with multiple lawyers to ensure that the way we are set up going forward is going to be a solid foundation that we can grow from. So that's really most of what this week has been surrounding. The development teams are going strong. Everybody is heads down into the code, getting things ready for the upcoming September 26th, which we announced last week. And part of our announcement last week was also about the Sharedrop date, which has commenced as of September 1st. And what's exciting about that is that we've seen that the BitShares has moved off of the exchanges in massive quantities. We're seeing hundreds of millions of BitShares that have left the central exchanges and gone to the DEX, all for the sake of the Peerplays Sharedrop, which is quite phenomenal. We weren't really anticipating that kind of movement, but it's really exciting to see that the BitShares community is still that engaged with the Sharedrop that they can get with Peerplays. So we're really happy to see that. Yeah, so those are the primary things that have happened this past week. Really, it's been all about the organization and creating a proper association for the Peerplays blockchain to ensure that we're well within a good operating system. So you want to have the right foundations going forward. You don't want to set things wrong and then suddenly something comes out from the left field because you didn't do your due diligence. So yeah, that's pretty much what Peerplays has been up to this past week, and it's looking really good, and we're very excited. So for now, I'm just going to pass this off to Michael, and if anybody has any questions, they're welcome to ask.
I would like to ask a question if no one else has one. I'm always interested to hear what you guys learn and what other people who are working in these projects are learning with respect to the legalities of them. Are there any takeaways that you can give people who are maybe starting projects that are interested in this aspect, the legal aspect, but might be holding them back because of that uncertainty?
Sure, I can jump in and answer this, Fuzzy, and I guess I'll just real quickly introduce myself again. My name's Michael Maloney, also known as Crypto Prometheus. I am the communications manager and also one of the project managers for the Peerplays project. So in regards to your question, Fuzzy, I would say that my biggest sort of piece of advice, so to speak, after going through all of this is simply it might sound kind of funny to say it this way, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to sort of be creative and consider. One of the things we've discovered is that many times even the lawyers don't really quite understand or know how to deal with some of these things, and the reason is because this isn't going to come to a surprise for a lot of people, I'm sure, but there's just not a whole lot of legal framework out there that, there's not a lot of statutes or laws that have been written pertaining to a lot of the things that we're doing. So, we're doing things sort of ahead of the curve in terms of, setting everything up. It's really more of a game of risk sort of mitigation and choosing how to, or figuring out, which risks are acceptable and which ones you want to avoid, than it is actually, following a very specific black and white, framework that of all the do's and don'ts that have been spelled out by, years and years of, case law or something like that. It's a different ecosystem. It's something that requires
Sure.
I think it requires ultimately, a knowledge of business and, to some degree a knowledge of law, but it's been very useful and helpful to speak with a number of different lawyers too, and I know that can be kind of an expensive proposition, but don't, just like doctors. If a doctor tells you you have a specific issue, generally speaking, the best advice is to get a second opinion or a third opinion as well. Doctors are just human beings, and they're coming with their own biases and their own understanding. So really the same thing applies to lawyers. You've got to obviously listen to what they say, but also sort of try to integrate that into your own understanding and think about the other things you've heard, and and again, coming back to my first piece of advice, don't walk around in trepidation that everyone's coming to get you. I think a lot of people, just because it's such an intimidating sort of field of to wade into, that people tend to just be maybe err on the side of ultra conservatism and not take any risks. And I'm not obviously saying that being totally cavalier about things is the right answer either, but in this particular case, in this particular space, it really is sort of a wild frontier, and a lot of the things that
it is very new.
So
I mean,
anyway,
even after 10 years, it's very new, and our governments all work in such a slow speed that to see this stuff actually have a lot of precedent behind it, I mean, it makes sense that it wouldn't have much. I've often thought that I like the angle of gaming because, let's face it, a lot of gaming tokens have not like Blizzard's gold in Diablo 2, for instance. That's something completely different to most laws because it's called a digital currency instead of, or a digital, what is it? It's a virtual currency. That's what they call them. So, and the laws are different for that stuff, but now it's like the two spheres are kind of converging. So I wanted to kind of ask that question because you guys are going through this journey, and for like 2 weeks, you guys were going through this journey, I'm suspecting. So I figured, maybe this is a good place for you guys to kind of explain some of that stuff, what you've learned from the experience. Is that incorrect, or has this not been, the past 2 weeks haven't been talking about the legal aspects?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's been absolutely ongoing since the beginning. This is all, part of what it is that we're setting up. Obviously, like Jonathon mentioned, is we have even a little more sensitivity to these types of things because of the wagering and gambling aspect of the Peerplays platform. And one of the things, it's interesting just to comment on what you were mentioning about these currencies not really being currencies, so to speak, or they're not classified as currencies. I mean, I know the IRS classified Bitcoin, I think, as a commodity or an asset, which makes sense in a lot of ways, but is simply that, even a lot of the gaming permit laws, applying for gaming permits in certain jurisdictions, it's all tied into fiat. It's all tied into fiat money. I mean, if you look at, it's all based on, the laws are only written in ways that, it's sort of a self-contained system in a lot of ways. If you're using their money, you have to abide by their laws. Money, the fiat currency in a legal sense doesn't even belong to you, even if it's in your wallet, right? It's not considered yours. It's considered the property of well, it's tough to say exactly who it is. It's not necessarily the government's, but in any case, it's really, really very different when you're talking about trading these digital currencies or digital assets. There's a lot of places in the world that don't even consider them really much of anything. And, so again, you kind of have this crossover between, what it's legally, what the boundaries are legally, and also sort of what the lawful boundaries are, right? Because there's a difference between legal and lawful. And, as in this space, as long as you're complying, as long as you're doing actions that are lawful, then you're a lot more protected if there is no really legal framework. And if you're sort of so far ahead of the curve and you're acting responsibly, then you're set up a lot better than someone who's just sort of looking to operate under the table and skirt around, to stay out of the limelight. And let's face it, there's a lot of gambling platforms that are like that, right? People, they come and go. There's a lot of fly-by-night, online gaming platforms. Some of them are legit, some of them are total scams, but one thing that a lot of them have in common is, well, nobody wants to pay taxes, right? That's the let's face it. I'm just sort of being frank here, but that's one of the reasons why, all this shady operations happen anyway. I mean, it's the same with any black market, right? And I'm not really convinced.
Or even a gray market.
Right. And I'm not really necessarily convinced that the government or corporation, bankers, whoever it is that's sort of sitting at the top here, cares about what it is that you're selling or buying. They just care about whether or not they can get a cut of it, right? So black market.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, there's
That's
no
exactly what I was about to say. As long as they get a cut, buddy, it's all good, right?
Right. So so ultimately, again, you're dealing, if you deal with it all as sort of a closed loop system, which it is in a lot of ways, and it's all sort of dependent on your use of their fiat currencies, and of course, you even have these ways in which they can leverage their own situation, or they can leverage you out of whatever it is you're doing. So, for example, if you're holding a huge amount of fiat currency in some bank account somewhere that they could potentially seize, regardless of whether or not they charge you or even level any civil charges against you, they could simply tie up your assets and hold them and tie you up in court and disrupt your operations. And there's all kinds of sort of dirty tricks that they play, that they have the possibility of playing. And so, there's all this sort of, there's all this overlap with what are the best practices? How do you, again, like I said before, what it really comes down to at this level is figuring out which risks that you want to take, balancing out your risk profile, sort of putting your best foot forward in many different ways, setting up in jurisdictions and places that are traditionally more friendly, or who don't have don't have at least strong consequences that have been given in the past, that are sort of against what it is you're doing. And yeah, it really is a challenge, though. I mean, I think this has been sort of one of our biggest challenges, besides on the technical side, is figuring out exactly how to deal in a world that there isn't a lot of precedent for what we're doing.
Well, and Brindle actually brings a good point here to kind of along the lines of this, with kind of how on the opposite side, the users and everyday builders can leverage technology. Like, for instance, he's saying Uber and Lyft have been operating since the beginning in violation of statutes that make giving rides without being an official taxi illegal, but they moved quickly and became indispensable because of that. And because they became indispensable, this is not from Brindle, so if I offend somebody in the taxi service, look at me. But because they became so indispensable and everybody knew about it and wanted it, it's almost set that precedent now. So the laws have almost had to adjust because of that precedent being set among so many people in such a fast period of time.
Well, we're talking about the evolution of sort of socioeconomic relationships, and it's completely it's an unstoppable force to try to to put, to stop the advent of these peer-to-peer sort of structures and business models. And so, again, it's always never going to happen until it's inevitable, right? And you see something like that, it sort of goes viral really quickly. And they don't have the resources, not to mention it would be an absolute PR nightmare if they just started going out and arresting, soccer moms and their Volvos for, giving somebody a lift on a Tuesday afternoon. It would be a nightmare. So, so that, yeah, at the end of the day, like, we really do have the power in so many ways. I mean, it's mind-boggling how, if the switch was just flipped, in more people's minds, and that's happening. Obviously, this whole process, what we're setting up, is going to give people the structures to sort of continue to migrate away from these sort of structures of bondage, let's call them, that we've all been operating under in these fiat systems for hundreds or thousands of years. We now have these opportunities to sort of join together with each other and create our own economic engines, and all these experiments we're doing. I mean, we're really pioneers, and it's honorable regardless of whether you're making or losing money in the short term. I mean, obviously it's our goal and all of our purpose here at Peerplays, to run Peerplays as a solid business, to set up, Peerplays with the tools necessary to do so. There's nothing, experimental, so to speak, about our process that we're using. We're going about this with, sound traditional business practices and things like that. But nevertheless, there's always an element of all of this, which is that, we're so far on the frontier that nobody can truly say how all of this space is going to evolve. And so one thing that is certain, though, in my mind is that this is going to be the new economics. This is going to be what we can all look forward to, in terms of upward mobility again. Our younger generations and have the opportunity to actually, have economic security and build a better world because they can migrate away from these systems that are just completely destroying them and everything around them, and choose to just abandon them in a lot of ways. Abandon them not only sort of physically or directly by not using their currencies anymore, but abandon them sort of say emotionally or spiritually as well. Just turn away from what it is that's happening and do something different. And you can't just a lot of times people will look and sort of rail against what's going on, and they'll get caught up in the emotion of it, and they'll try to go, stand on a street corner and hold up a sign and think they're making a difference. But if we can give people, something to actually
Until the
channel
cops
their
are called.
And until they, get into a brawl or something. But, I think that, again, I'm just sort of reflecting on the nature of the space, which is what I do sometimes on a Friday morning when we're all here talking about these things. But yeah, I guess though, just to sort of wrap this up, Fuzzy. Yeah,
well, I wanted to just say something to you here, because what you're talking about is to me what I'm thinking from all of this, between what you're saying and what Brindle is saying, is that you kind of have to be bold, and you have to say there are going to be risks. We have to look at them, but we don't have to consider them the worst risks in the world, because you can plan for this stuff along the way, and you don't have to start out with everything that you need. You can get all the stuff that you need along the way. But at the same time, that the key aspect to take away from this is try to make sure that you get as viral as possible, and something where people can't take their eyes off of it and can't stop using it. Because if people want it badly enough, then the laws are going to fit around that existence because of the simple fear of what will happen if all the people get upset about losing this type of service, and it's actually a legitimate and valuable service. And I think gaming is a good place to start with this, and we actually have two guests today who are talking about that. One of them is obviously the Peerplays project, right? But it is a very interesting thing to think about. Now, real quick, there was a question by T-Bone, and I didn't want to pass over you, T-Bone, but I try to fit these into the conversation where I can. Sometimes I just throw them in front of them, just like I'm about to do with Crypto here. But Crypto, do you have any updates on side chains and how those are potentially going to work?
Yeah, I sort of talked about this a little bit last week. I don't really have any particular updates at this stage. It is something that we are, it's on our list. We've got a lot of, realistic ideas about it. We've got, I would even go far as to say some very realistic plans. But at this stage, our main focus is getting the Peerplays, testnet up and running, moving forward after that, and getting the Peerplays blockchain up and running, and then there's a number of features that we're going to be building immediately after that for the Peerplays blockchain. So Peerplays is really the main focus, and will continue to be the main focus for obviously of the project itself. But the sidechain thing, there's a lot of benefits, obviously not just to Peerplays but to the ecosystem, and our responsibility. We've always taken and analyzed our responsibility in sort of a fiduciary sense very, very seriously, and we don't like to we're not in the business of taking the money that we have and going around and spending it on all these things that aren't going to directly benefit Peerplays. So that said, obviously the sidechains is going to directly benefit Peerplays, and part of the plan with that, like Custom Miner just asked a question here in the sidebar about using smart coins from the BitShares DEX. Smart coins from the BitShares DEX, as well as potentially Steam-backed dollars, are both tokens from external platforms that aren't inherent to the Peerplays platform. Peerplays doesn't have market-pegged assets. It doesn't have any stable coins of itself, of its own rather. So that's going to be a major advantage of getting the sidechain stuff up and running. But like I said last week, the way that we've designed it, which is I believe significantly better than anything that's been designed out there yet, and I'm not really at liberty to talk about exactly what it is we're setting up because it's proprietary at this stage. But it is it's going to take a period of time. It's not going to happen in the next couple months. I would put it at least 6 months out if I wanted to put a very broad timeline on it. But that's not even don't quote me on that. I just wanted to say something because we're getting the question every week here now, and I don't want to give the impression that this is something that is imminent.
Sorry, man. I just wanted to say the reason I brought it up was because it was something that we talked about at one point in time, and I believe I remember, and Data, please tell me if it wasn't you, but I thought that I remembered him saying something in Telegram that side chains would be like $100,000 probably to make one. The first one would be obviously the most expensive, and then after that it would get a lot cheaper. But to do it all up front would cost a pretty good bit of money.
Yeah, it's going to require a number of developer resources. It's not going to be a small project, and it is. I'm not trying to. I don't want to give the impression that it's not realistic or that it's totally on the back burner. It's something that we very much want to do. Again, because it'll be very, very beneficial directly to Peerplays, and we think it's even going to be very necessary, especially once the platform is really up and running and we're bringing on new users at a significant clip. So. But at this stage, it's just, we have another focus, which is, like I said, getting the testnet up and running, getting the blockchain up and running.
Sure.
That's gonna take us clear through to the end of this year. So we are going to have naturally, once we've completed our current set of milestones, which actually we've done really well at keeping right on schedule with them so far. We're only about a week off of our initial schedule that we set back in May.
You guys have an all-star team.
So
I don't know if a lot of people realize that, but
we've got some people that have been doing this, for a long time, and people who have already accomplished a number of really, great things in the space. So, but yes. Anyway, what I was going to mention is that we will have another set of milestones naturally. Once we've completed these, we'll have a layout for the next year, and that's obviously something that everyone can look to and reference and understand what it is that's coming down the pipeline. So
Well, it sounds great, and I love to have the different updates every week. Now, I know that you guys have been busy with the legal side and some other stuff behind the scenes, and we covered that pretty good. We talked a little bit about Peerplays website, talking about the smart coins from BTS being able to be used on Peerplays. Is there anything else that you think beyond the earlier conversation that we had with that expansive one about the legalities and the risks and all that stuff. Is there anything else that you think that we should cover, or do you feel like everything is pretty much taken care of?
I don't really have anything else on my end, unless anyone else has any other questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Man, it just naturally falls into almost the 30-minute spot.
Cool. Well,
Okay.
I guess I'll just wrap up and say thank you again to everybody for coming by this morning and all your great questions. And yeah, we're super excited here. We've got just a couple more weeks before we get to show you all what we've been working on for the last few months. So yep, stay tuned and we'll be back next week.
Sounds good. And if anybody wants to keep up on the news on their own, is the website still peerplays.com/news?
Yeah, that's correct. The news site with all our updates. Yep, peerplays.com/news. And also we've got a Rocket Chat channel, which is like Slack. That's https://peerplays.chat. And naturally, we've got our Bitcoin Talk and BitShares Talk forum threads too, which usually have our updates and some other sort of casual conversation that happens occasionally. So check those out as well.
Awesome. And they can support you on Steemit as well, correct?
Yeah,
Under the Peerplays tag?
The Peerplays tag, all our major announcements go up on Steemit. They're simulcast on the blockchain. So yeah, stop by and give us an upvote if you like what we're doing.
Thank you very much, guys. It's this transparency that people are going to look at over time and see that the projects that work on these types of transparency and community building efforts are going to become foundational projects to the people who listen, because they're going to know that these are real projects and not just ICOs that 95% of which are going to have literally no chance because there's no intention for them to have a chance. So I want to remind everybody how important it is that all of you are here. And I want to also use that right now to say, please consider going to the ShareBits link for the guest book and signing that guest book today to let everybody know that you have attended. I'm keeping these all stocked away, and once the ShareBot is up and running, I'm going to distribute tokens out to everybody. Just wanting to let everybody know that this is a way that I can also reach out to people if you add your email in there. So please consider doing so, and I will try to get this stuff out to you whenever the ShareBot is up and running, and it is moving forward. But that's not what I'm here for right now. So please sign the guest book, and we'll go ahead and we're going to move on. Number 2 today is Pro for Never, and he is joining for the Jules Coin project. On Steemit, he is at Pro for Never, and the 4 is actually the number 4. So, Pro for Never, are you here?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, thanks for joining us and being transparent and talking about what you love, which is blockchain technology, with a bunch of crypto fiends who can probably listen to projects like this all day.
Thank you. Yeah, so our ICO has ended now. So the original goal with the ICO for the Jules project was 200 BTC. We ended up raising 336. So we had a very, very active last couple of days, very, very busy. And so that is now finished. So for those who are not familiar with Jules, it is a gaming-based cryptocurrency. We do have a number of existing games that are already online that are going to be having the coin implemented in it very soon, actually. The web portal is already online for that. So following the ICO, we've finished the initial coin distribution, and we've been focused on getting the web portal online and adding new functionality to it. So at this point, that is online, although I'll let the specific features be left for Roy, who's going to come on after me. And outside of that, I've then been working on getting the initial use cases set up and making sure that we have everything on our side ready to go in terms of using the jewels, adding to exchanges, that sort of thing. So as of the ICO ending, we've been attempting to get listed on a number of different exchanges, and we've also been, as I mentioned before, working on the portal itself. So following that, we have been able to be listed on 2 different exchanges, although we are still waiting on the last couple. Now, we have gone ahead and listed all of the information on what we've been working on in the last week or so since the ICO ended on Steemit. But for those who are not familiar, the 2 exchanges we're listed on are Yobit and Correx. So we've also been applying to a number of others, but unfortunately, we're waiting for the approval process, which can take a little while.
So what exchanges are you currently on?
So right now we're listed on Yobit and Correx.
What's the second one?
Alcurex.
Oh, sorry, that's not in my notes. But yes, all Correx and Yobit.
Awesome.
It's like one of the smaller volume exchanges.
Yeah, it is a smaller exchange. They went ahead and added us, I believe it was about a day after the ICO ending.
You guys should definitely consider getting on the BTS DEX as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe we could talk to some people about it.
For sure, yeah. We've applied to a number of different ones and submitted all of our required identity information, all of the information on the coin, submitting the source code, that sort of thing. At this point, we're just waiting for them to finish the review process so that we can go ahead with that listing.
Cool. So you guys, okay, I just have to dig into this because I know I'm pumped to hear how much you guys earned. And it was over 300 BTC, you said, right?
Yeah, 336.
336. Okay. So you said the last time that you were here that most of the funding was for running the servers pretty much, and that you were doing a lot of the work pro bono or for very little.
Yes and no. The difference there is the existing games, so Apex and Heroes, which is coming out soon, those do not require funding. They're separate. And that's both for legal reasons and financial reasons. We don't want to be using money that other people have put in and invested to be able to fund something that's 99% complete. That wouldn't be fair to our investors. So those are separate. The funds being raised are being used to develop the Jewel system. So all of the web portal, the functionality in terms of transaction history, and to develop a series of provably fair gambling games using them to add extra use cases. So you are correct, though, in that originally our estimate included us doing a lot of the work for free, and that is still the case. Most of the extra funding isn't necessarily going to change our timeline in terms of development. It's going to be able to extend it. So a lot of that funding will be used in terms of the Rebirth project, because originally in our budget, in that 200 BTC sort of estimate, there was a little bit of wiggle room there. But for the most part, any funds that weren't raised or any extra expenses essentially just chopped off some of the Rebirth demo. So a little less content, a little bit less for players to experience in that initial version of it. So seeing as we did raise significantly more, that means that we'll have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of development, in terms of bringing on new developers, new artists, but it'll also allow us to add more features and more functionality to that initial alpha build of the Rebirth game.
And you said that was slotted for what, 2017?
So the initial development of the Rebirth project will begin Q4 2016. But in terms of playable functionality, yes, that would be, I would say, Q2 2017.
Yeah, that's kind of where I look at it for me, because that's from my perspective. In 2017, I'll be able to play it, is basically what I'm thinking.
An initial version, yes. Obviously not a finished project. It is an MMO, so first of all, it's never going to be fully done. It's always going to be a work in progress.
Of course.
But the actual initial beta will be one or two classes with a few different types of skills, a few different pieces of equipment. That way we can test all of the gameplay elements and really start fine-tuning it and ratcheting all the fine gameplay mechanics to determine the feel and the pace and the core engagement of the game. And we'll then be able to distribute that to users and have them play with other people, test how it all functions, and then we can go from there in terms of adding new quests, new armors, new weapons, new game features.
While we're on this topic, I'm Roy, just to clarify, one of Chris's partners. I've been talking to Fuzzy, and he told me that, to summarize, his vision for Beyond Bitcoin was that eventually groups on here would build their own community, so to speak, and that's definitely something we're leaning towards in that direction. Sorry, I'm sick somehow in summer, but bear with me. So yeah, and on that note, we are looking to start hosting bi-weekly meetings. We don't have a set date for when we're gonna actually start doing this, but when we do, it'll definitely be announced on Twitter and on our Steam. Essentially what those meetings will be is they'll be sort of like a congregation of other gamers, and it can really be anything between a casual gamer and someone who is more familiar with the pro scene. And it also doesn't necessarily particularly matter what games they are, so long that they somehow conform to like MMO standards, or they at least have like some elements of like competitive gameplay. So for example, League of Legends, which isn't an MMO, players from that background is still very valuable to us because League of Legends does have a huge competitive scene. So to elaborate on what we were looking to achieve with those type of meetings is more so discuss with players ideas of mechanics in games. So like, for example, how certain spell works, counterplay, reacting to certain timings to, let's say, block a spell, that sort of things. But there are other topics as well. For example, what quests are appealing to people. We'd like to know that, like, referencing existing games. What elements of player versus environment are appealing. What kind of boss fights are appealing, and basically like along that sort of thing, so that we can start filtering what existing forms of gameplay exist that seem appealing to us and our players, and sort of meet them at a middle ground. Of course, we're also looking for innovative new ideas that haven't been done yet that we can sort of start fleshing out. But yeah, definitely that's something to look forward to, and I invite all of you guys to start coming to those when we do start hosting them. We'll be hosting them on actually Discord instead of Mumble, because we feel it's easier in terms of getting people to participate on Discord, since nothing needs to be downloaded. Everything can simply be done through the browser. So yeah, there'll be more news on that to follow. Chris, did you have some more to add about the ICO, or should I talk about the poll?
I have a couple things to go over, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so taking a step back from that, obviously we are very excited to begin work on the Rebirth project, but immediate concerns are with the ICO, getting the use cases implemented, making sure that the new servers launch, that sort of thing. So since the ICO ended, as I mentioned, I did post a update to our Steam page and on the Bitcoin Talk forum. And most of what's happened during that time, as I mentioned, was with the web portal, and Roy will be going over that a little bit more in terms of base functionality and everything. But we've also been touching up our existing systems on the existing servers to get them ready for Joules being added. So for those not familiar, Heroes is our server that's being launched within the next couple of weeks. Our initial goal was to launch it within 2 weeks of the ICO ending, and that still seems as though we should be able to hit that target, although we are mostly going to have to make sure that we have all of the Joules functionality in place before that launches. So during that last week, I've been touching up the systems there, making sure that we have a proper referral system that is not abusable by players. We do that by binding everything to what we refer to as a hardware ID, although it's actually a key generated based on a number of factors on your computer. So processor serial numbers, volume ID for your hard drive, that sort of thing. That way, two players will have not the same ID theoretically speaking, and also it will be quite difficult for players to change. So we use that to track things such as hardware ID bans if we want to block someone from connecting permanently. We're using it in our referral system to make sure that you can't spam fake referral accounts. And we're also using it for our patch note system. So when you open the game, it'll check what's the last patch note you were displayed. If there's a new one, it'll show it to you, but then it won't show it no matter what account you use while you're on that same computer. That way players with multiple accounts don't get spammed with the same notices and the same information. We've also been touching up the PvP events, improved map selection, adding a number of varieties of new events to that and new tournaments. We've also enabled our poker gambling system for player testing so that we can weed out any final bugs on that. And we've just essentially just been polishing and tweaking and making sure that it's ready to go as soon as the Jewels side of things is ready to integrate with it.
Wow, it sounds like you guys are really busy.
It's been a very busy couple of weeks, yeah. We have a lot that's being worked on right now.
It's funny you say that because I feel like a lot of people have this picture in their head where, for example, you finish an ICO and then everyone goes out and celebrates. And I messaged Chris this following day after about the ICO, and we were having a discussion, and it was pretty much went like this: "Hey Chris, have you done anything to celebrate?" And he's like, I had a glass of wine while coding still."
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah, that's pretty much the story for me. It was just another day of, you wake up and you start coding on whatever needs. And
well, you celebrate with a smile,
right,
and then you just keep doing what you love doing, man.
Exactly. And for us, the ICO, it wasn't obviously the money is necessary so that we can hire more developers, and the currency is incredibly useful to the project. In terms of additional functionality we can add to the game, and moving forward, additional functionality that we can add to the Rebirth project. But from our standpoint, we just want to be able to do our work, and we want to be able to make sure that players get the content that they deserve, and make sure that it's user-friendly and functional and entertaining to them.
But just to clarify, even though we ourselves didn't personally celebrate, we are absolutely thankful to those who did invest, as we did pretty much blow our expectations out of the water and definitely got way more than we were intending to get. On that note, should I start on the web portal, Chris? Or
yeah, I'll pass it over to you, and you can go over all the web portal changes.
Okay, so after we launched, or after the end of the ICO, we began distribution through our website, jewelsproject.com. which is still currently under construction. If you weren't an ICO investor, this website probably isn't that useful for you at this point because it's still closed off. But if you were, then you were emailed basically instructions as to how to log into the site. And we basically started putting together a dashboard at this point. So once again, if you were an investor, you have access to this dashboard now. And it has the basic management features you would expect to see in a dashboard, like two-factor password reset, IP history log, that sort of thing. We also added the basic financial features like sending and depositing jewels, the maturity and transaction history, and purchasing jewels via PayPal. So if it wasn't sorry about that. If it wasn't clear on our last meeting, you are capable of purchasing jewels via PayPal, because this is a friendly method that players are familiar with, purchasing basically a game token based off of using PayPal. The important thing to note here is that PayPal does work a little differently than if you were, for example, to purchase the actual token off an exchange using, let's say, Bitcoin. The first big thing to note is that tokens sold via PayPal are sold at a far higher markup than whatever the Bitcoin asking rate currently is, obviously converted back to USD. And the obvious reason there is a couple things, which is to serve as a buffer. And the other aspect is that we want to actually strongly encourage our players to actually go out, get Bitcoin, and get jewels. We provide instructions as to like how to do this in various resources for different countries within our dashboard. The key difference between using PayPal and actual cryptocurrency is that if you purchase jewels using PayPal, you basically have what's called a 45-day maturity period, which is that the jewels that you purchase are considered immature, which means that you can spend them within our games and use them within our site, but you can't withdraw them out of our system until 45 days. And that correlates basically to PayPal's refund policy. So it's a means of like sort of protecting ourselves against that from happening. So it's clear to see that even though they're both jewels in a sense, obviously mature jewels, which is the crypto-based jewels, has an inherent value because it's more, or inherent higher value because it's higher in terms of flexibility than the jewels you buy purely with PayPal. We're still working on adding functionality into the web panel, which will probably be done within the next week, as Chris said, prior to the Heroes launch, which will allow you to like purchase items in game and that sort of thing, basically spending your jewels via the web portal. And then once that's ready to go, I believe we'll be very close to the launch of Heroes.
Yeah, from the server side, Heroes is virtually ready to go. Obviously, we have a final round of testing to do and fine polish, but we want to make sure that all of the web functionality is in place so that as soon as the server launches, people are able to use jewels. They're able to use them to purchase cosmetic weapons, different armor, skins, that sort of thing. And that definitely has to be fully in place and tested before that's ready for launch.
So with that said, I'm going to assume that the standard allotted period is about 30 minutes, which actually works sort of well for us because I just wanted to sort of, unless Chris has any, Chris, do you have anything extra to add, or can I wrap up?
You can go ahead and wrap up, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, on that note, I think that about summarizes where we're currently at, but there is definitely more we have to tell people in terms of what we already know. So I want to highly stress this, especially to our listeners who are going to end up listening on the SoundCloud and YouTube, because we know that there are several members of our community that don't actually come out to the Mumble Hangouts currently, but they do listen to them on YouTube and SoundCloud. I strongly recommend you to come to next week's meeting because we're going to be talking about topics that the majority of you actually want to hear about, which is the blockchain side of things. So when I say the blockchain side of things, I mean essentially the goals of Jules is to merge blockchain gaming or blockchain with real world gaming. And so a lot of this talk next week will have to do with smart contracts and how we're going to be leveraging those in the future, decentralized aspects that currently actually a lot of MMOs have negative stances upon. So an example for that is like selling items outside of the game, which effectively gives rise to like black markets, selling accounts, selling gold, that sort of thing. So next week you can sort of expect it to be like a hot topic from us. I don't mean to like hype it up, but like I figure this is the thing that most people want to actually hear about from us the most.
Yes,
and
this
just
is one of
to
the
tack
things.
on to that, I realized that we did skip over. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I did realize we sort of glossed over. I mentioned the Jules gambling, but I didn't mention our current status with that. So obviously Heroes and Apex are the first use cases. They're, for all intents and purposes, ready to go. We just need the Jules side of functionality finalized. But the other use case that we want to really push hard for is the Jules gambling. So that is provably fair gambling. We have a couple of sort of phases of that we want to roll out, with phase one aimed for launch within about a month or two of the start of development, which is essentially starting now. And that is going to be focusing on single player versus house style games. But rather than what we oftentimes see with currency gambling, where almost is sort of a spreadsheet, it's sort of min-max. It's not what you might normally consider a full casino game with proper sound effects and visual effects and that sort of thing. So what we're trying to do is we're essentially designing the entire system as a virtual casino environment. And then each of the individual gambling games is its own table or its own slot machine or its own set of cards. That way it all feels sort of cohesive from a player perspective, and it makes it more fun to play. Even if you're not really focused on the cryptocurrency side of things, you might actually sit down and want to play the games a little bit more rather than just for the chance at higher profits. So the phase one, we're intending to do about 4 different games, and that'll be a 3-year-old slot machine, a 5-year-old slot machine with a a networked jackpot, a dice game, and a set of video poker. So at this point, we're heavily into the design document for those games. We have a number of assets essentially ready to go for developers to use, and we're beginning the process of interviewing various Unity developers for that. So if you or someone you know has a lot of skills with Unity or with 3D modeling, definitely hit us up. We'll provide a link in chat there, and we will be accepting applications on that. We're in the process of sorting through them now.
Man, it's great to know that we actually have marketplaces that are going to be able to exist for people who do this stuff, who build these things. So crypto is enabling this. It goes along the lines of what we were talking about earlier with making something extremely viral. And because it becomes viral and people are used to how it works, it kind of, the legal frameworks that are built are built around that and set that precedent that it's needed and that it's wanted by society. So these are the gaming use cases are the ones that I think are personally some of the most powerful at this stage of blockchain technology.
I think on that note, just to reference something that you guys are all familiar with, Steam is actually like sort of a perfect example of what we're trying to do, which is, let's suppose as an outsider you were using Steam, as opposed to, let's say, using like Reddit or something like that. Steam feels completely natural. You don't need to be immersively, or you don't have to have like a ton of knowledge about crypto to use Steam. It's very user-friendly in that sense, where it sort of masks its crypto elements behind the scenes. But if you are crypto savvy and you look into it and you find out how Steam works, you're like, wow, this is some really amazing technology. And we sort of have that same idea in terms of how we're developing or going forward with our development, which is everything should feel very natural to the user. So we don't want anything to feel really out of place and clunky, as we feel like that's sort of probably one of the bigger things that prevents a lot of laymen, so to speak, from joining crypto.
Oh, definitely. The user experience is probably one of the most difficult barriers to entry for most users. Now, the thing is, as I see it, most people who are PC gamers especially are generally advanced users, so they can pick up on cryptocurrency, and there's kind of a bridge there for them, because they're used to using alternative currencies in ecosystems that are called video games. These games have their own rules, their own economies, and they're familiar with going through those economies and going from economy to economy and seeing how each are different, and still being able to fit into the rules of the game worlds, right? So you have a demographic that is pretty primed for technology like this, and being able to actually take maybe a couple of those extra steps to start earning Jules or any of these other different blockchains that are going to come out and pay for work. This is something that I see being extremely valuable, especially for the millennial generation.
So if anyone has any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them. To answer G-Chicken's question from before, no, we actually haven't been asked for any sort of compliance fee by Bittrex yet. In terms of what we've done with them, we've registered, we've submitted our identity documents to verify, we are who we say we are. After that, it's pretty much been up to them to just process us and decide at some point, okay, we're finally going to add Jules. So the only thing that's really left is like for them to either, let us know what the next steps are. So at this point in time, we've been asking our community, and we ask you guys to do the same, which is to show us support on Twitter by, tweeting to Bittrex and, asking them to add Jules. And as well, if you're active in the Bittrex Slack, just talk about us there. And the more we raise awareness and the more popular we become, the more incentive Bittrex will have to list us. In terms of a fee, if they do ask us for one, depending on what it is, we're happy to comply. Obviously, that's negotiable, but we'll have to see what they say.
Okay. Well,
So
real quick,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just about to ask you, is everything been covered for you guys, or is there anything else that you'd like to get across to the audience?
Chris? Anything?
I think that pretty much covers it in terms of where we're at in development. Right now, we're just diving back in full speed, making sure that we can get everything up as quickly and as smoothly as possible, both from a player standpoint and from an investor standpoint.
Well, okay, real quick then, do you guys have a specific handle on Steemit?
So right now,
the
Pro for Never account. Yeah,
okay,
one moment.
And also, is there a website?
There we go. So I pasted the one that we have there in chat.
Okay.
So right now there isn't, like I said, there is a website, but like I said, it's not very used to someone who wasn't an ICO investor. What we would recommend is if you are interested in our project, that for now, until we do, have like a website and maybe perhaps our own forums set up, that you join us on Slack, as we have started to build a community on our own Slack. So I'll paste a link for that in a moment in the chat if any of you guys are interested in joining. So just give me a moment.
I've also posted the link to my Steemit account there. We only have a couple of updates there, but we're going to do a weekly post on what we've been working on, the status of the project, and everything on that page.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much for attending today and joining as guest speakers. I could tell everybody the same thing that I like to say every time, but I think you all know that the aspect of transparency is extremely important in this space. So just want to say thank you to you guys for showing up and doing what you do, because without you guys doing this stuff and getting into the arena, there wouldn't be a whole lot of people who are interested in cryptocurrency listening. So, it's very important. And the next person in line who's going to be talking about another project who is in the arena is CM Steam. He's going to be talking about Gridcoin and their hangouts. For a grid cart, they want to talk about a Gridcoin market pegged asset a little bit. So without me going too deep into it, CM Steam, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you ready to go, buddy?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, I'm going to pass the torch to you.
All right, cool. Excellent. I'll just paste some links into the chat, so I'm not doing it while I'm talking quickly. There's like 5 links there. Okay, so I'll keep this quick. I'm going to continue the appeal for BitShares witnesses to publish price feeds for the Gridcoin market pegged asset. Since my last appearance on the Beyond Bitcoin Hangouts a couple weeks ago, we've had our second witness publishing price feeds for us. So the 2 witnesses are delegate.ihashfury and Waku. Waku. Yeah, I can't really pronounce it, but thank you very much, guys, and I'd appreciate that. So yeah, if any BitShares witnesses are currently listening, please consider adding Gridcoin. Yeah. So moving on from that appeal, I'll talk about Gridcoin's kind of news and what's upcoming. We've been given an estimate of the first 2 weeks of September for Gridcoin being integrated into OpenLedger. So hopefully within the next few days or the next week, we'll be integrated into the BitShares, decentralized exchange. That will be our OpenLedger will be our bridge onto the BitShares decentralized exchange. After which we'll be able to utilize the BitShares like web wallets, mobile wallets, and potentially like BlockPay in the future. I'm really excited for this. And speaking of web wallets, we're also being integrated into Coinomi Android wallet. It's been on the books for like several months, and we've not quite got an estimate for a release. They're quite slow development. No offense, guys, if you're listening. But when we have Coinomi Gridcoin integrated into Coinomi, that will support our application to being integrated onto into Shapeshift. To which these platforms will help provide liquidity to Gridcoin, as well as offer multiple options for holding Gridcoin without actually launching the full standalone client.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say regarding liquidity, it seems like you guys are doing something, or either that or there's just a mindless pump, but I find it hard to, I don't feel like that's the case right now.
Yeah, I was going to get to that a wee bit further along, but over the last 24 hours, we've Gridcoin alongside Curecoin and Folding Coin, all scientific cryptocurrencies, have experienced a large surge in trading volume to the tune of about, I think, $800,000 in 24 hours for Gridcoin, and we've increased from $2 million market cap to like between $4 and $5 million market. One of the links that I linked in the chat kind of details past instances of price increases, and I don't know of any event that's going on that could have caused this. So I think it's speculation and perhaps a large whale trading across all of these scientific cryptocurrencies. So it's good. It's driven up our trading volume by about 100-fold the typical daily trading volume. So open ledger integration can't come sooner. It'll be great.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the point. I didn't want to interrupt you too much, but it was a point that I felt was important to make, because this is one of the reasons why having multiple witnesses running price feeds for coins that have good communities is a smart idea, because you never know when all that volume is going to potentially come. It seems like Gridcoin is being noticed in this second wave, so to speak, of altcoins, and there's a reason for it, right? There's multiple reasons for it. One of which, though, is the fact that you guys have been around since, my God, for so long, since altcoins existed, pretty much.
Yeah, a lot of I was saying this before the recording started. A lot of people are moving out of Bitcoin. It's the developments kind of feels like stalled, and if you try and talk to the developers about the in-depth stuff, you just kind of get your credentials questions. Whereas if with Gridcoin, at least we've got brand new users to the community joining our Mumble hangouts and asking direct questions about very technical things. It's a lot more of a welcome environment. Altcoins where it's not as hyped or high stakes.
Yeah, and where everybody can work on their own niche in blockchain technology.
Indeed, and I mean, perhaps it's got to do with the fact that our Gridcoin community is started to get quite a lot more active, especially with the Gridcoin Hangouts. It was a great idea, in the first place.
You guys are doing a wonderful job, man.
Yeah, we're holding weekly Hangouts at this point, and we seem to be getting between about 13 to 20 users regularly.
And that's not talking about how many are listening afterwards, too.
Yeah, afterwards on YouTube, SoundCloud, and all the other platforms that we've distributed our RSS feed to. So talking about more Gridcoin-related topics quickly, we've been chasing up BOINC projects to implement SSL encryption on their web servers. So, I think it's only 8 projects out of the 29 whitelisted projects don't have SSL. And half of them have gotten back to us saying, yeah, we're going to do it. It's just a funding thing. So that's improving security across across the entire BOINC community, It's a high priority for us, at least. We've been discussing approaching charities to accept Gridcoin. We've noticed that Curecoin's been doing this, and we found several charities that accept Bitcoin without using, a Bitcoin-specific payment processor. So hopefully we can get added there and it'll complete the circle of you're crunching, you're using your computer hardware to attempt to solve cancer, then donating the grid coin to a cancer charity, like that, but for multiple different charities and not just, cancer related. We've been voting on vote weight balance via the Gridcoin's inbuilt voting mechanism. So that's just determining who in the Gridcoin network has more say in a vote. Those who hold the coins or those who are crunching BOINC work units continuously.
I'm sorry, I was actually writing down some questions that I'm planning on asking you.
That's all right. Also in the Gridcoin Hangouts, the last Hangout, we were talking about the implications of the recent Flip Feng Shui Rollhammer attack that's being documented recently. Its basic kind of TLDR is that it's a DDR RAM hardware issue that affects 85% of all hardware, all DDR hardware manufacturers. The main problem is that you can basically redirect a target virtual machine, their RAM to your own created RAM on the local hardware. So it's pretty crazy. I'm butchering the explanation of it, but the basic issue is that you could an attacker could potentially spin up a virtual machine for on one of these free trials on the cloud and attack other virtual machines on the co-hosted hardware. So, we're discussing if you're running web services, switch to dedicated hardware, contact your cloud computing provider, make sure that they're not vulnerable, because
so this is because a lot of people are using their own virtual systems, right?
Well, it seems to be able to
BOINC.
break this isn't just for BOINC though. I mean, yeah, it does have implications potentially if you're running BOINC in a virtual machine, then if someone was to distribute one of these Rollhammer attacks through a BOINC project, it could escape the virtualization layer and attack your computer you're hosting it on. So yeah, that's something you should all consider, investigating if you're vulnerable, especially if you're not on gated hardware in the cloud. That is.
Wow.
So lastly, I've got to talk about is it's not entirely related to Gridcoin, but it is BOINC related. It's the update regarding Project Rain. So I've linked that in the chat, and the basic idea behind Project Rain is that it's the practice of distributing cryptocurrency assets to BOINC users based on their verified BOINC computation. So I've upped it from 11 supported cryptocurrencies to 28. Some of the supported currencies that some of you might be interested in are obviously Gridcoin, Steem, BitShares, Peerplays, and I'll also be adding the Heat Ledger, but there's over 28 at this point, so there's a lot of options. Why you would want to do this in the first place? You could go on BitShares and create a user-issued asset for $10, then distribute it to potentially tens of thousands of users based on their computation, towards specific projects. And it's kind of like a way of, recruiting users to your cryptocurrency platform, whilst at the same time, rewarding those users for crunching BOINC work.
Well, essentially, you're also able to kind of pinpoint the largest accounts then too, right?
Yeah, if you can proportionally reward users through Project Rain for their their BOINC computation. So what that means is if someone's got 100 cores crunching versus someone with only 2 cores crunching, you're going to reward the guy with 100 cores 50 times what the guy with 2 cores is, contributing. So the basic idea behind is that it's a massive new share dropping vector that doesn't require your end users to handle their private wallet keys nor provide proof of their real life identity. There's the potential for this to become one of the to like distribute an asset on a greater scale than Oracoin managed to do. I don't know if you know about Oracoin, but it was like this Icelandic
Aurora?
national, Aurora coin.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
like
yeah.
they distributed it to approximately 56,000 people, but you needed to provide, proof of your real life identity through social media. With Boink, there's over 500,000 active Boink users and 4 million registered. A lot of those are like, they've gone away from Boink, but still nonetheless, imagine if you distributed a user issued asset to like 100,000 people, that'd be pretty crazy.
Yep. I won't deny it, because the Boinkers are, man, the community is how old? It's over 10 years old, isn't it?
Yeah, it's over 10 years old at this point.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize that that's older than Bitcoin.
Yeah, and something to take into account is that a lot of these users have significant computational power, like individuals who potentially own like data centers. You don't know, because they've got like they've got thousands of CPU cores or hundreds of graphics cards. If you've got a cryptocurrency platform that aims to reward distributed computing or decentralized computing, like take Golem for example, if you distributed, if you did a Project Rain against Boink users, it's like the sharedropping theory, like buying users, right? But these users all have proven available computer resources.
I think we need to use this stuff more. We need to use share dropping more. So any tool that brings in more share dropping, or the ability to do so easily and cheaply, is another key to it. But to be able to do that is, I think, something that a lot of people don't realize just how valuable it is, because you're looking at a targeted marketing campaign essentially that is looking at this exact type of people who you are trying to get on board with your crypto project.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like say you did distribute a user issue asset on BitShares, it's not got any like backing value behind it, right? But then if you distributed it to like 50,000 people, that's 50,000 people are going to be like, oh, cool, I've got an asset on that platform now, and they might then check out the platform.
Yes, that's true for the UIAs. Maybe not so true for the MPAs or the fee-backed assets, but yes.
Yeah, that's largely why I've not included like your base cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and like Monero and stuff, because with that if they've already got like established value. So say if you wanted to rain a single Bitcoin, right? That is quite a lot of money, but it's going to become dust if you're going to spread a Bitcoin across like 20,000 people, Yeah. So it's not suitable. Another thing, aside from just creating your own user-dished assets, and distributing it as 100% that way, potentially what would be really cool is if we could get future like ICOs to commit like 1% to a Project Rain. That way they could recruit a significant user base, as well as reward Boink users for their computation. But nothing's planned with that yet. That's just I see all these ICOs. It's like I got no money to invest, but I do have Boink computers, crunching away.
Oh yeah, man, and I think that it's something that people need to consider on BitShares. They need to consider those market pegged assets and supporting Gridcoin on there as well, because there are going to be ways of tipping Gridcoin and all kinds of other coins through BitShares. And then you're also going to have something like this for share dropping on Gridcoin. So whenever you start having side chains that start popping up, you never know when something like Gridcoin and BitShares might have a side chain. And having ways of share dropping on each chain is a valuable thing for every ecosystem, right? Because you have unique individuals working on specific problems in each community. So it's so important to this idea of share dropping, and so few people really recognize it. It seems that it blows my mind at times to really think about it.
Yeah, share dropping was one of the main things that really brought me to the the BitShares network back when it was BTSX. It was really
old school, dude.
Yeah. One of the other ideas for why you would issue, an asset through Project Rain is, imagine you created a BOINC project and you wanted to reward your workers or your volunteers. You could distribute, an asset at regular intervals, and create like an ecosystem, an economy behind your BOINC project. If it was like a commercial BOINC project, such as like, distributing Apache Spark or Google TensorFlow.
Well, this is a good question. Speaking of that, then, because this kind of goes along the lines of what you were talking about earlier. And one of the big things that I really wanted to get a little bit deeper into was the fact that you guys were talking about the SSL encryption. So if you were to have the secure socket layer on a project, your token is going to be considered more valuable too by most people, because it's going to be considered a safer ecosystem for people to use the BOINC.
Yeah, well, we had this big vote where a couple of users in the big Gridcoin community proposed to enforce SSL encryption as a mandatory requirement, and it didn't pass. But at the same time, it was a really low voter turnout. Something we really need to address is how to get voters to turn out in droves rather than just a minority amount. Because if it's just a minority of the voting weight, then people could push through agendas or whatever. But anyways, SSL is very important, and projects without SSL are a risk to the BOINC community, in my opinion.
Well, it seems like there's the ability for a project to be AKA whitelisted or not, but people are still able to work on projects that aren't considered quote unquote whitelisted.
Yeah, this whitelist, that's within the Gridcoin community. So we have like we'll vote on new projects that come in, basically have like a checklist. Is it, got regular work available? Is it secure? Does it have SSL and whatnot? But with Project Rain, it's only really a guideline, stick within what we determine safe projects. Because if you go outside it, if they've not got SSL and you're directing, a couple thousand users to that project to sign up, if they've not got SSL, then that's plain text credentials over the internet. That's risking your users. So it's just like a guideline. If you want to rain on your own project you've created and you're not being whitelisted in the Gridcoin community, then you can go and you can do it. It's no big deal.
I like how you call it Project Rain. Make it a raid. I know that's where you're going with it.
Yeah, man.
Okay, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to kind of close on the details of Project Rain. So not only have I added the cryptocurrencies, but I've also added secure chat fields. So like I'm going to have it so that you have to add a user within the Project Rain BOINC project as a friend before you get to see these details. But you'll be able to provide your Echo, Wicker, Ring, RetroShare, and PGP details, so that you can just increase communication security between users. So I'm really looking forward to Echo, actually. No, definitely.
Man, yeah, it sounds like you guys are on top of your game, and like I wish I could join every single hangout. I try to sneak in when I can, and I try not to talk too much, but you guys have a very solid hangout, and I really love joining up and listening in.
Yeah, it's good fun. Everyone's welcome to join. I put a link in the chat with tomorrow's hangout. That's at 9 p.m. GMT, the 10th of September. So please do join if you can make it. The final two things I'd say about Project Rain were that there's some delays in development purely because I'm chasing up increasing the security of the web server, and I'm not happy with the current password hashing mechanism. So we're trying to get that made more secure. And then the last thing I need to figure out before going live is figuring out what work units to distribute in order to have your Project Rain CPID, which is your BOINC identity merge with other BOINC project identities. And so yeah, I need to distribute a work unit, and whether or not that's going to be like just a simple hello world and then sleep kind of thing, or if it's going to be an actual, distributed some actual work to do, that's still in the drawing board at the moment. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say today. Thank you for holding this hangout, Fuzzy. Does anyone have any questions regarding Gridcoin or Project Rain or BOINC or anything?
If no one has any questions, I have a couple, but
Cool.
I'm going to hold off for a moment. Okay, so what I was going to ask you is if people want to support you on Steemit and all your efforts in the Hangouts, or just the Gridcoin community in general, how would they do so on Steemit?
On Steemit, we've got our own page that we're actively posting to. So it's just the Gridcoin page, like you would do for Beyond Bitcoin. You can also follow me at cm-steam. I post on a kind of regular basis. Going back to Project Rain quickly. I know I'm badgering on about it, but with relation to having Steam support in Project Rain, an idea is that you could create a topic in Steam, saying vote this and the funds will be distributed to BOINC users for this specific project, like, World Community Grid trying to solve cancer, whatever, So that's one way we could potentially distribute Steam assets to BOINC users and increase the impact of the Gridcoin and BOINC communities within Steam.
Yeah, that's this is exactly along the lines of what I'm thinking too, man, where you're going to have different communities supporting their own projects and using Steam to help support each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, okay, so we asked, and everybody now knows how to contact you and how to support you on Steam. How would they contact you guys, or is there a website where they can go, or a forum where they could go to become part of the the Gridcoin community? My apologies.
Yeah, if you go to the official Gridcoin website, I'll just put the hyperlink in the chat, 2 secs. If you go there, you'll be able to see in the navigation menu, there's a ton of links for the entire BOINC community for Gridcoin and stuff. We're mainly active in our forum on CryptoCoin Talk, as well as on our IRC channel in Freenode. So if you join CryptoCoin Talk or IRC, you'll get the majority of the community, and our IRC presence is quite significant. We've got about 100 users in there constantly talking from around the world. So everyone's welcome to join. All of our entire community. We're open to new users. We're looking for more developers if you've got the abilities,
Well, I will definitely be keeping in touch with you about the project, and there's a couple things that I also have been talking to you about behind the scenes. So maybe we can bring some of that stuff up here in the future whenever it's done. But thank you very much for joining us today, Custom.
Thanks for having me, man.
Always, dude. Always. And real quick, I want to ask, does anybody have any questions or comments before we end this part of the Hangout?
I guess I was just wondering if that new attack vector on DDR memory in virtual machines, does that not affect all of the witnesses for BitShares and all DPoS chains?
Yes, if you're hosting your witness node, or if you've got a web service on the internet like an exchange or a BitShares wallet, you should definitely migrate to dedicated hardware, and you should contact your cloud computing provider and ask them the tough questions of is their hardware affected? And 85% of DR says that yeah, they most likely are. It's majoritively a concern if you're running a virtual machine on the public cloud.
I just think most witnesses are not running their own hardware. They're using Amazon Web Services or something like that. So it sounds like a big concern.
That's a good point, man.
I just linked to a Steam post that I made about Flip Feng Shui. It's worth a read. There's a ton of links to go through. I believe it's being presented at the Black Hat conference very soon, where it's going to hit the fan, you know.
Well, thanks for bringing that up to us.
No, you're welcome.
Well, we know one person who's on dedicated hardware.
That's good to hear.
Okay, well, real quick, I wanted to just bring something up, and it wasn't posted to Steemit, to the RSVP
Fuzzy, before you
thread.
do that, can I ask a question? The previous conversation, I was on another machine at the moment, but the previous conversation about some issue with VPS servers and not dedicated hardware. Could you explain that one more time in a cursory fashion? It sounds like there's a vulnerability that affects all types of VPS servers that does not affect dedicated hardware, and I'm not sure why that would be the case.
Yeah, sure. See in the chat, there's a Steemit link to Flip Feng Shui, but I'll just read it out for people that are listening later on. Flip Feng Shui is a new exploit vector that allows an attacker virtual machine to flip a bit in memory page of a victim's virtual machine that runs on the same host as an attacker virtual machine. So that effectively allows an attacker to completely compromise co-hosted cloud virtual machines with relatively little effort. Up until now, it's not been an issue, but recently with this Flip Feng Shui is the weaponization of Rowhammer. So it's an attack on vulnerabilities within DDR hardware.
All right, I understand. So if does this matter whether it's a Zen or a KVP type of virtual hardware, or is it irrespective of the architecture that the virtual machine is running?
The Flip Feng Shui website says that all virtual machine vendors are vulnerable, so that's Arco, Red Hat, Zen, VMware. It didn't say anything about KVM, but it seems to be it expressively says that all vendors are currently vulnerable.
Interesting, because KVM has got quite a bit of different architecture with regard to security than what OpenVZ does and some of the other platforms for virtual computing. And if you've been in this cryptocurrency space any length of time at all, you realize that the KVM is the best way to go to provide the most isolation from any other shared hosts that might be on that platform.
It's definitely worth more investigation because not many people are talking about this, but this seems to be pretty. It's pretty huge.
Indeed. Well, thank you for the link. I'm looking at that Steam article now, so I appreciate it. Sorry to interrupt your flow.
That's all right. Thanks.
No, this is the reason why we do this, because, a lot of people who are in this room, they go out and they spend a lot of time learning about new aspects of different technology. And whenever we are covering this stuff, you guys all teach us a lot of different stuff. We all learn from each other, and that's one of the key reasons why we do these things, right? This is why we come together and work to provide not only the transparency, but to bring people together to ask questions and talk about the technologies and the tools that we have in our toolbox, help us identify and not only the tools, but the use cases where we can use them, right?
Yeah, definitely. As I said earlier, in our Gridcoin community hangouts, we've had brand new Gridcoin users come in and ask very interesting questions and, start conversations that we would never have had in the past, which will affect the outcome of Gridcoin.
And new people who are listening and interested in it, you might know everything on the surface that seems like it's, it seems like it's beating a dead horse to talk about something that's so simple for you to understand. But that's because you've been in this scene for so long, right? So whenever people in the crypto ecosystem, especially, but technology in general, when you've been here for a long time and you understand the basics pretty much in and out, and there's no real reason to bring it up in one's mind. It's always important to cover that for the new individuals who are coming in, who are listening and wanting to know more about the technology, because they're always going to be trickling in. The question is, are we going to catch them and teach them and do it in a way that makes them want to continue learning more and feel like it's a trustworthy ecosystem where they can actually start trusting people who are teaching them the stuff that they're talking about. But anyway, I did want to bring something up that G Chicken brought up on the BitShares forums, and I do use the BitShares forums. I don't type on them as much as I used to, but I do definitely still go there and read around and sometimes post. And there was a post that that Dash is the only cryptocurrency to pay for development via blockchain workers. And it was just something that I wanted to cover because, you know, there have been times when I've been wrong when we've been talking in these Hangouts, and it's generally pretty obvious. And whenever we talk about stuff, we want to be kind of as honest as possible, right? But it seems like this has not been covered, and BitShares actually offers something very similar. And it's very interesting to see that BitShares wasn't even in there, even though they've talked about it in the past. This was specifically on Let's Talk Bitcoin, and here I'll provide the link, and I wanted to see if you guys had seen this. This is the type of thing that I think hurts multiple cryptocurrencies, because I think that if there's something that another cryptocurrency has accomplished too, there's nothing wrong with giving those cryptocurrencies credit. But to come out and say it's the first and, you know, the only one, these are types of things to say that kind of come across as not necessarily trustworthy or journalistic in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I'm not perfect on all this stuff, but I do recognize that I do not know everything. So I just wanted to ask, what do you guys think the state of is, what is the state of crypto media, and what is our role in crypto media in bringing these projects to light and talking about the value that is being built in the space? Yeah, well, Custom Miner, you say it's perhaps it's out of ignorance. The only problem with that is that we know that that's not necessarily the case, because the person who is talking about this has actually done interviews with people from BitShares and understands it pretty well. Yeah, that's G Chicken saying, I just didn't like the direct question asking if any other cryptos had this tech, and given she had done a video relating to Dash and BitShares governance models. Yeah, it was the Hashocracy video. I remember that video specifically, and it just doesn't come across as really a good way of going about covering stuff, you know? It's like omitting something is one thing, but then at the same time saying that, you know, Dash was the first, it's kind of unfair. Now, I don't say this because I dislike Dash, because that's not the case at all. It's how it's represented here. I actually think Dash is a really cool technology, and it actually still enables people to mine, which is pretty cool, because, you know, if you've got something that people aren't mining, then you're cutting off a large user base who's interested. But at the same time, I was looking at that, and I was kind of thinking about it's so hard when you want to create content and you have your own biases to not come across as omitting things and almost lying by default because you're omitting something that should be known, or should be brought in. You're not necessarily lying, but it's not necessarily honest either.
When was the last time, however, a BitShares worker proposal got funded for anything significant?
Well, I know that I personally haven't done a worker because, Dan couldn't even get it. I could look it up again. Huh?
Is this because of poor voter participation, would you say?
Well, I suspect that it's two things. It's partially that a lot of people have their BTS in centralized exchanges. And I also think that as a centralized exchange, generally there's no reason for me to want BitShares to get funded to the point where it's going to someday replace me. So I think that that's the conspiracy theory side of me, but the side of me that thinks just, the rational explanation is that they have a lot of different, or maybe not the rational, the logical explanation. What we know is that they have a lot of BTS from BTS holders. And because they're holding those tokens, they can put proxies in place to downvote things and say they don't want dilution. And that I know that that has happened with Unity to a degree. I don't know exactly, the depths of it, but I know that if that's an exchange that's doing it, then I suspect others would be interested in doing the same.
Well, if there's evidence of exchanges doing that, perhaps it's worth, educating the BitShares community on, misbehaving exchanges so that these exchanges cease to have as much power. Yeah,
it's something that we definitely need to look into a little bit more, because this is something that's, this is another reason why, like, for instance, what they were talking about with share dropping of Peerplays. This is a great example of how you can let people know and give them an incentive at the same time. Because, if you're holding your BitShares on an exchange, a centralized exchange, and there's a share drop, you're not going to get that share drop. So that's one way that you can say, okay, well, I'm getting screwed by holding my tokens on this centralized exchange, so I'll just move my BitShares back to the DEX. I think that's something that's an interesting thing to consider.
Perhaps it's also like a poor campaigning by voter users who are proposing worker proposals, Like perhaps if you were to create a worker proposal, you'd have more success if you were to like properly, come on the Hangouts, go on other, podcasts, networks, and try to reach all of your users. I think a large problem is that
that's a good point.
Users kind of walk away from a crypto for a long period of time. Like they'll come back every like 3 months and they'll missed everything,
Well, and I think that also plays into what I was talking about, though, like where you have people who say, well, it's just easier for me to have 30 or 40 different cryptocurrencies all on an exchange instead of in a wallet for each one,
Yeah, but that's so dangerous.
Oh, it's so dangerous. Yeah, anybody who's been in the space for long enough realizes how dangerous that is. The problem is, but that's the state of crypto at this point in time. And that's kind of why I tell people that it's a good idea, if they have their own cryptocurrency, to create their own BitShares DEX as a front end and use their own coins as the primary trading tokens. Sure, you could have BitShares too, or Bitcoin too, but and maybe some market pegged assets, but you could trade them all against the market pegged asset for Gridcoin, or an IOU for Gridcoin that has a verifiable backing of actual Gridcoin. These are things that can happen, and when you have these different blockchains working together, you're going to see a synergistic rise in the use of them.
Is there like a guide for how new cryptocurrencies could go about doing this? Because I kind of investigated this a while ago when you were talking about it previously, and all I could find was an older BitShares web wallet. I think it was like 0.9 or something, and I wasn't sure if that was what I needed to use.
Yeah, I guess that the best way of doing it would be to look at the documentation that does exist, but I will say that BitShares documentation, these are the things that BitShares has had problems with because it wasn't so centralized in its ownership that the voting actually, it requires a lot of funding and effort to, from a community that's very active to get that stuff accomplished. Now, I think that it's something that BitShares should do. I think that they should have their own complete portion of a Hangout here to do this stuff. Maybe these are things that I'm looking into myself, but at the same time, with what I'm wanting to do, I'm wanting to make sure that people realize that even though I'm biased towards BTS, I'm wanting to bring other cryptocurrencies and their valuable efforts in the space together, because that's really where the power exists on creating this blockchain technology for a reason that uplifts humanity and helps everybody, as opposed to being used for the wrong reasons, right? Don't get lost in the tribalism, so to speak, I guess, is the big point that I'm making. And that's kind of where I'm wondering right now. And I've actually been talking to Chris a little bit about this documentation project. And he's working on the BitShares website and some other things. But we're thinking about some initiatives and stuff with BitShares along the lines of what you're talking about.
I do know that like the crypto community user will keep blinders on anything that isn't their own investment. They'll see another cryptocurrency they're not invested in. They'll see it as hostile. And not even try and break down those kind of old ways of thinking.
Well, once we realize
sorry, go ahead.
Just once we realize that the technology, we're building tools. It doesn't matter what color the handles are.
It's potentially probably worth also approaching as many exchanges as possible with the documentation on how to become a bridge or gateway for the BitShares platform. Perhaps an exchange with dozens of alternative cryptocurrencies supported will become a bridge and bring all these other assets onto the BitShares decentralized exchange. That could be very beneficial.
By the way, I was just talking
That's
with
a great point.
I was just speaking with Waku offline here on another thread about the Gridcoin support that he added to BTS tools, which I would like to add myself. So I started looking into it while I was listening to you guys, and he said that he thinks there's a failure that occurred yesterday, and there may be a black swan event in the Gridcoin thing. So just wanted to pass that along to the community in case they were interested in what was going on.
The price has increased quite significantly in the last 24 hours. Yeah. There aren't a lot of holders of the Gridcoin market pegged asset at the moment because we've not got that bridge to the BitShares decentralized exchange from the Gridcoin blockchain. But I would be entirely open to suggestions for the settings or variables for the market pegged asset. I increased the forced settlement time to 7 days to potentially offset any potential risk. But yeah, if you see a problem with the settings of the market pegged asset, speak up. I'll probably implement it.
All right. Well, I'm kind of new at, well, I shouldn't say new, but in terms of the details of these market pegged assets, I'm by no means an economics expert, and I really don't understand some of these settings. I just basically mirror what other people are doing and try and keep my tabs on what's going on there and make adjustments as necessary, as guided by other people. But I couldn't tell you what's going on right now. I do know because it's new and there's not very many people that are using the market peg assets that it's going to be it's probably going to be hard to hone in on the right parameters, and we may require making several adjustments before we get to a place where stability is optimized.
Yeah, when I was setting up the Gridcoin market peg asset, I was looking for as much detail on these parameters, and there isn't much, like in the BitShares documentation. It kind of
welcome
tells
to
you
the community.
Yeah, it tells you the basic what it is, but it doesn't say whether increasing it or decreasing it would be better, and I kind of went by what other smart coins or market pegged assets had done, aside from that, I don't quite know the impact of them, really.
Yeah, I understand your confusion because I'm right there with you. I mean, I've been in the BitShares community for a couple of years now, and I've watched all these market peg assets come up, and there's always a lot of tweaking and discussion around them whenever they first are established before parameters get solidified, and I don't really understand the discussions that I've been a part of. I really didn't understand it very well. In order to implement it, I just basically kind of mirrored what other people were doing, and it seems to work out okay, but I'm not an expert when it comes to setting these parameters either.
Well, I don't know that anybody is necessarily an expert at this stage. It's something that is being tested by all of us on what the best parameters are, and I suspect that over time we'll see that various coins and commodities and different smart coins are going to have different settings. And I think that's going to be based off of various trading attributes, like the way that people want to trade them. So I suspect that there's sweet spots, but it's something that will need to be documented along the trek. And it's cool that Gridcoin is doing it, because you guys have a lot of good ideas already. So if there's a way of actually decentralizing the trading of Gridcoin, or holding the value of Gridcoin, you're potentially opening it up to a lot of other people who are going to be using other smart coins like the fiat ones. So there's benefits in so many ways that BitShares gains and Gridcoin gains from a synergistic type of effect. If we're all learning and utilizing what we're learning. Now, this is really where it gets to me, though, where we need to really talk about documentation. And that's what Chris was talking about and has been really kind of hammering on. I think that it's something that the BitShares community, we need to think about. I mean, the documentation is good, but it was done by, Xerox and maybe a small handful of other people who helped.
Well, the difficulty, though, Fuzzy, is when we kind of ran out of steam because of all the anti-inflationary talk that took place just about the time Steemit got started. We haven't been able to get proposals put forward for these things. So why would people work for free to implement these things? There's some people that are new to the community, perhaps, but we would like the community to operate. We'd like BitShares to operate on a less than altruistic phase and make it something that everybody gains, rather than having to put people under the pressure of working for free.
Well, maybe we can get together and set up a worker proposal with the Gridcoin community on some things too. And I mean, a lot of the work that's going to be done is going to be open source. So why not reach out and do some of this stuff? Let's get some worker proposals in. Let's see what happens. It might not be the same today as it has been in the past. Data said that a lot of BitShares tokens have been pulled back to wallets. So maybe this is a perfect time to look into doing something like a voting initiative for something.
Maybe so. That's a good point. Things change. It's a dynamic environment. So maybe things can be revisited now.
Yeah, we need to constantly revisit it, man. And we have to constantly remind ourselves that things are always changing, and we have to be humble and expect that change.
And Steemit almost makes the worker proposals, I don't know about obsolete, but redundant. So, I mean, before you would try a worker proposal, you would probably want to try it out on Steemit and see if you get some traction and some funding that way.
I say go with both. I mean, nothing wrong with potentially winning on both ends.
Definitely. I was talking more about the order. float the worker proposal first on Steemit.
Oh, that's a good point.
Also in here, in the Mumble chats, like with the Gridcoin community, before we hold like a vote, on this an important decision, we'll we'll bring up the topic. We'll have like an open floor where anyone can like discuss the matter, so that we all get the viewpoints and we can tweak the poll options or whatever. And then before we go live, just try and drive up participation as max as possible.
So what would we call this? The BitShares documentation project?
Well, BitShares, documentation is such a broad category for BitShares. There's so much to it. I think it needs to have some kind of a structure so that we can attack the things that are important first, because there's just a huge amount of documentation that could potentially be done. And then we have to fold in what's already been done and figure out where we need to focus on things that haven't been done that are important.
Yeah, and I think that we can be able to link to different projects that are graphene based, that have their own tools and utilities and features that they add on. So we can have like a database essentially of, it branches out from BitShares into other BitShares powered chains and talks about that stuff. But I really think that, graphene is a powerful thing, but documentation for this is, and I'm not talking like good documentation by one or a small group of sacrificial lambs. I'm talking about like, really good documentation where we spend the time and the money to get it done,
I want a Tuck for Man comic book version of the documentation.
Oh, geez. Man, I've been loving that guy, but geez, some of the stuff on Steam is crazy. Anyway, until a guy raises his hand, what's up, man? You don't have to do that. That's a good point, G-Chicken. BitShares University documentation training.
Can you hear me now?
Cryptos.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I was just listening to you guys' documentation. I hate documentation. Documentation is necessary, yes. It's very necessary to be able to cut and paste references and give links to specific clauses in the documentation so that you can't mince words, and it's very definite. When you're just first learning a system, throwing a book documentation at somebody is never going to work. And if you do log into Bears, you get overwhelmed instantly. It's unlike anything you've seen before, even though it tries to say, well, these are charts and charts are familiar and this is how an exchange works. And if you know how an exchange works, you should be able to use Bears. But I think what we need more of is almost like if you watch complicated world games on YouTube, the first thing somebody does is like, oh, I've heard of this game. Let me go see some gameplay. So then they see some gameplay and they're like, oh, that looks cool. So you don't have to download and buy the game. You can see some gameplay and you're like, that looks neat. And then what you do is you watch a couple of walkthroughs, right? Walkthrough level 1 on how to get a weapon, like on World of Warcraft or something like that. If BitShares had a few more of that, gameplay type videos where somebody's actually eating in BitShares and talking about it and showing the different smart coins that they have, and then you have some walkthroughs. This is how you create an account. This is how you do this. Now, I know some of that is out, but I think that's where our efforts should be concentrated at this stage before we worry about more documentation.
Yes and no. So yes, because it's what I think you're referring to as a type of documentation.
Yeah, it's not just documentation in general. I think he's broken it down, but it's part of documentation. What he just described.
There's a lot of work to be done. Undoubtedly, and that's something I'm trying to kind of head up. What I'm trying to figure out is an effective development stack for Steemit and Steam-based apps, and then basically, publish that stack and exactly as he said, in fact, show how to use it, because it's an uphill battle, let's say.
The reason why I say
You got to
Go ahead,
pull
Tom.
you've got to pull a lot of information from people that have been in the space for a long time to really get some of the nuances. That's what I've never found this not to be the case with the BitShares environment or the Steemit environment. That's why I have not decided to get involved with the Steemit environment as a developer or as somebody that's kind of a mover and shaker behind the scenes like I have in BitShares, because it just takes so much effort to pull information from people to get it to where I could use it. So, and I'm sure I'm not alone. There's other people that struggle with the same thing. Other people that are a little bit more gifted and a little bit more involved with the development side of things, more of a, on the development side, they might be able to read the code in a little bit faster fashion and get up to speed than I was able to do. But that's why I've kind of relied on a lot of documentation, which unfortunately has just been piecemeal as BitShares has evolved.
Yes. And that's exactly where I'm going. Now, I agree that IntelliGuy, I agree 100% with your videos idea. I think that that's extremely important for people to see, wait a second, this isn't just a cryptocurrency wallet where I download it and I hold a currency. This is a place where I can hold and trade all of my tokens. And that's the wallet. You know, it's got its own decentralized prediction markets even. But the thing is that whenever you start getting into that, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg problem, right? You know, if all those markets don't have a bunch of great market pegged assets, then you're going to have problems too with people who are like, well, this trading, you know, I'm learning to trade, but I don't like the volatility as much. You know, some people might like it early on, but other people might not. You know, there's a lot of, you don't want new users to be the ones who get fleeced though by the people who know and love the volatility. So essentially what I guess I'm saying is the documentation, it enables the developers to really add on to it, you know. And yes, some developers might not need a lot of documentation or want a lot of documentation, but the better documentation that you have, the more likely that a developer is going to have a resource where they can go and find the answers they need. That's always going to be available.
That's really important, because if we want to grow the ecosystem, then it's important to be able to grow the development community. And the easier you can make it on developers, the better you're going to have. You're going to have a much better quality entrepreneurial environment for people to build onto BitShares. But you've got to provide those tools and make it easy for them.
Well, you wouldn't believe how many people, actually developers, I've talked to since Steam came out and essentially showed what a blockchain can do, because that's one of the most valuable things about Steam in terms of like the scalability of what it shows, right? What it can do in terms of scalability. Now, the thing is, you have this chain that comes out and people see what graphene technology can do, and they start looking at BitShares too, and they're like, wow, man, yeah, I did not know that BitShares was so amazing. It's, you know, it's really kind of a hidden gem. And then the problem that I get from almost all of them is the documentation. If only the documentation was a little bit more in depth and gave me all the answers I need.
Think of how much further along BitShares would be if we had that attitude about documentation early on in the project, to where we could bring developers in earlier rather than having them struggle to get up to speed to you know, pull the information from the core developers to get things done.
Exactly, because it really is tough. Just getting those references and stuff. And so basically I'm going to record my my experience end to end with getting things up and running and getting, you know, an effective stack moving, because it is difficult. It's too difficult.
That's a good point, man. Yeah, and it looks like G-Chicken is bringing up a very good point. Chronos Crypto has made some amazing BitShares videos. Now, that's not, you know, documentation in the way that we're probably talking for developers, but it is a good place for everybody who's interested in knowing how BitShares works, a little bit, to know a little bit more.
Yeah, that's why I say documentation is a very thick subject, and whether you're talking about things that will help developers and kind of behind the scenes mechanics of what's going on versus the people that just want to use the site as a user and operator's manual. Those are radically different approaches to documentation. Both are necessary, but you have to decide what your priorities are. And if you're going to have a documentation project, which side of that fence are you going to focus on? And if you want to split the effort and say some of it's going to be devoted to user documentation, operator manual type stuff versus developer kind of things, and you have to define what that split is going to be. So documentation is a big item, a big subject that needs to be thought about more, and a project plan come together rather than some ad hoc quick little approach to it.
One of the examples that I use is Facebook. In the early days, I was using Facebook and without really understanding how it worked. And then the more you use it, the more you learn how it works, because it just kind of appears on your timeline or something. And you're like, oh, that's how you like something. Oh, that's how you add an app. Oh, that's how you do this. And Facebook is really good because you get grandmothers using it based on their grandkids telling them how to get on it and stuff like that. And it becomes easier the more you. And there's a lot to Facebook. If you look at the documentation of Facebook on how every feature works, forget about it. If you took like a YouTube video on a full tour of Facebook, forget about it. But you get the basics. If you can get with the basics, you're good. And then I noticed that people were making games, and if you wanted to make a game, they had the developer API area that would explain more about how to do it. And then somebody comes along and says how to make a Facebook game in 3 easy steps or something like that. And then there's a YouTube that you watch and you're like, oh, maybe I can invest my time as a developer to learn more about this. I find that with crypto, what we do is a little different. We actually get the developing done, and we attract developers to the API, and we kind of build everything as much as we can. And then what we do is because the learning curve is a little strange, developers will spend so much time learning how the system works that they forget about I'm looking for usability or something like that, user interface. And so they kind of work backwards, and we build user easiness into the system after it's already built, as opposed to designing it.
Is that really true with Facebook with regard to React.js? They were the ones that developed React.js, which is a fantastic API and very, very much improves how user interfaces can be designed and how easily they can be designed. Now, how could that have been done if there wasn't a focus of bringing developers in earlier on?
I'll give you the example that where my mind is while I'm talking is I'm looking at Peerplays, and I've recently become interested in Peerplays, and there's no secret why. It's on here all the time. I went to the website today, and I figured, well, I'm going to download the Peerplays client. After clicking all over the website and reading this and reading that, and there's plenty of content there, I found out I think there's going to be a testnet on September 24th or 29th or something of this month. And I was like, oh, that's why I can't download it. Maybe if they had a download link, like because that's what people automatically assume there's going to be, then you would be like, oh, that's why the download link is about to show up soon, and that's why it's not here. That way, like in 3 clicks, I can understand something rather than traverse the whole website to find that. And it's not like there's no content about Peerplays, and there's not like there's no mumble shows about Peerplays, and it's there. Like all of the content is there to the point of information overload. All I wanted to do was download Peerplays, and I didn't know that I could. So that's an example of you got to think like a layman user that would just first show up on the site. And the developers are not the best person to maybe come up with that. They should have a user in training, somebody that's not a developer, doesn't listen to the mumble, and just
dear God, yes.
just say, look at it from your point. Do you know how to download Peerplays? And they're like, no. And then bring them up to speed, and that will give you your user whatever. I don't know how to say it.
User experience, but you're absolutely right.
You got it.
You definitely do have to have a user focus, and that is sorely lacking with the many development communities in the crypto space, no doubt about it.
Real quick, hasn't the idea always been that you let it be as easy as possible for developers to build, whatever they're going to build, and then make it open source in such a way that those improvements will always be made, but the documentation is there for every iteration to only get better. Because whenever you look at all these different chains, like BitShares documentation is going to help other chains exist, right? Just like Peerplays. Peerplays might hit a different demographic who's interested in blockchain technology, though, and funnel people toward graphene technology in general. Hello?
I'll explain. Something that happened to me just now. At the beginning of this mumble, I knew that the guest book was going to come up. And so the first thing I did was I converted some SBD to Bittrex to buy some BitShares to create a BitShares account and get my alias on there before somebody stole it, right? And I managed all of that, but it took me 45 to 50 minutes of doing that, only to come back here and find out that, only to find out the guest book was closed, and I got really frustrated when the guest book was closed. But that's okay. But I thought, oh, there's no way a user that Quantum Mumble could actually go through all of that to get introduced to BitShares after taking 45 to 50 minutes to understand how that all works.
Yeah, and the guest book is going to be, everything's going to be different on that a little bit. It's going to be changed slightly. But I do understand what you're saying. And that's, the irony of all of this has been that BitShares has actually been so decentralized in its ownership that has been one of the biggest problems. But whenever you hear a lot of the people who call it a scam, they're the first ones to say, oh yeah, Dan Larimer had a huge amount of tokens from the very beginning. Like they say all these things that are actually completely untrue, because if they were true, then Dan would have gotten his worker proposal voted in and things like that, for basic. That's like Sonny King not ever having any tokens in Peercoin, for working on it. Like the community expects him never to do, to always do everything for free. Now, Peercoin's different, mind you, but the fact of the matter is that this is a new kind of proof of stake that has been utilizing the voting in a different direction to make kind of more direct democracy over these chains, right? So having a lot of people holding on to that token, and it kind of makes it more difficult, especially if they're on that exchange. And then what you're saying, the user experience, if that user experience is hard for them, which, let's face it, anybody who's used to just a regular cryptocurrency, they're going to see BitShares wallet and go, what the hell? This is like, 50 different cryptocurrency wallets in one for me. That type of stuff makes it a little bit more difficult, though, right? And you're right. That's something that we need to focus on as well. But I guess the main point I'm thinking of here is we kind of have to do both. We don't really have much of a choice, I don't think.
One of the problems is that as you become more acquainted with something, you become less of an asset, being able to go with the user experience. For instance, I could see some gaping holes in it, but I can't really dumb down myself again to be able to see it from a fresh look. Developers are the worst ones for creating the documentation now. They can do it, but they need a test group, or what do you call it when they test line a new product in a market survey, I don't know what they call it. They bring them into a lab and they pay $50 and they get a room full of 300 people and say, okay, well, this is the new product. Let's see how you guys feel about it.
You're talking about a focus group.
Yeah, focus group, human factors.
Okay, yes, that's what we need, is some focus groups for some of these projects.
That's actually kind of what Jules' project was talking about today, right? That's essentially kind of what they're going to be doing, is like a little focus group hangouts.
Okay, good.
But they're a different project, though. But these are the points that you're bringing up, I guess I'm saying, is this is stuff that other people are looking at and recognizing, too. And it's very pertinent subject for everybody to consider in every cryptocurrency, because this is the, usability for both developers and users are very important. I would say core issues that should never be overlooked. And I think that that's one thing that a lot of crypto projects need a lot more of.
Yeah, Microsoft kind of learned this over the years, and Microsoft's been around forever. They used to have, like, you open up your email program and they had it was new message, reply, forward, delete, not much more. And if you wanted to go fishing for extra features, you had to go up to the file to find them. So that's kind of what you need, is a very basic interface with a lot of the meat hidden that you can turn on and turn off. And under the view menu, you can view everything else, right? Or add this extra toolbar to my things. Now I'm more adapt to it. So when you first log in,
this is actually why I. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. You cut out for a second.
No, I love it. No, that's all I wanted to.
This is the
whenever somebody cuts in, then that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, you're right, because that's when they're interested in what you're saying. And this is exactly why I tell people and I advocate for.
Well, so I'm very interested in what's being said.
Well, you look at something like, for instance, Peercoin.
I just
right?
I agree so much. I'm not saying anything, but boy, do I ever agree.
Well, you look at Peercoin, for instance, and I tell people, like, what MakerDex did was something really brilliant. They said, we're going to take the BitShares wallet, but rather than have 40,000 possibilities, well, infinite possibilities, we're going to have markets that we open up against our own token. And our own token is going to essentially white label this wallet as, it will be a DEX, and we will white label it and have, a limited number of assets that can be traded, because the average user is not going to want to have to look through a million different trading pairs to find the ones that need to be traded, right? So if you would actually see a different cryptocurrency come out with their own exchange where they're trading their token as the primary token, now you have a reason for different cryptocurrencies. Like I would bring up Peercoin and Gridcoin as good examples. You have various reasons to create assets for Peercoin and have them transferred over the Peer Assets network, but also traded on BitShares, and they could be traded against Peercoin, and people could literally download the Peercoin branded wallet and trade all of that stuff against the projects that are blooming and developing in the Peercoin ecosystem. Or in the Gridcoin ecosystem, you have different projects that are doing similar things for Boink, and they'll have their own tokens that might trade against Gridcoin. So you have all these different the ability for this kind of like basic user interface, and it's not necessarily basic, but from a trading perspective, it is basic, and it also directly helps and benefits the community of cryptocurrency traders who are holding a specific token and are maybe whales in those ecosystems. Does that make sense? I mean, like, I bring it up because of what you're saying, IntelliGuy. This needs to be simplified. And whenever you look at the BitShares wallet, there's a lot to it. Now, I think it was done well if you understand it, but it takes a lot to understand it.
It does. And and one of the key things we're talking about here is, if you're talking a video game where you start the game and then you die right away because you didn't know how to change your weapon or something, that's not a big deal. But when you're trading money and funds, it has to be basic, really basic and simplified. People can't be worried that they're doing the wrong thing.
Step by step.
Well said.
Well, and that's really what brings me to the question of, it comes back to what Custom Miner said. We need to, as a community, get together and get some people voting on workers for some of this stuff, because That's the only way that we can rationally try to get it done. And also, of course, use Steam. But, I personally, I want to try to minimize as much as we can, or maximize rather, how much people can use both of these to get this stuff done, because it's going to be a common framework that everybody is going to end up using in various ways. Would you guys back us, or participate in that?
Yes to the common framework. Yes to that.
Oh, definitely. One thing that I came on today is I was messing around with BlockPay's website just before I got here. And if you remember before, I said that I had missed a paragraph when I said I didn't understand the allocation and stuff like that. And I feel dumb. As much as I know crypto, I feel dumb every now and then, and I don't like that, because I'm not the one that's dumb here. It's the interfaces and stuff and the way that information is disseminated to me that puts it in a format that I have to feel dumb, and I don't like that. But one example of that is I missed BlockPay ICO, pre-ICO, only to find out today that it says, right on the front page, it says, find out how we did. Now, I remember that for the BlockPay ICO, I had to buy Bitcoin and transfer a certain wallet and do this and do that and all this kind of stuff, only to find out today, no, I didn't. All I needed was a BitShares wallet, and I could have bought a token through Open Ledger, and I didn't know that because I just didn't know that. I gapped that. And I was like, geez, that would have been so much easier. More familiar with BitShares, and I didn't know that I could buy it from there. And then the real surprise came when it said, and just so you know, all the ICO tokens have all been burned or something. So I was like, oh, really? Because I didn't think they were going to sell that many, and I didn't know that they were going to burn the rest, making the rest more rare. So I'm like, oh, that's two things that I didn't know, and now it's over. So,
well, I will say this, that we've talked about a lot of that stuff in the Hangouts, but you're right. I mean, to expect everybody who's a new person to the ecosystem to see that and pay attention to our Hangouts to get this information is probably a bit much.
There's a lot of assumed knowledge when we discuss these things, whether it be on the forum or in Mumble here. A lot of people assume that everybody else that's participating knows what's going on, and a lot of times there's holes in that knowledge to where people kind of have to stumble along to get to what they want, so they can accomplish what they want to accomplish.
Yeah, at a glance, should give you what you need to know, and then if you want to find out more, then you can dig deeper, right? I know that exactly. It's no fault of, I mean, we all try, when we're talking about documentation, we all try our best. We try our best to discuss and to have these recordings and be like, listen, if you would have just listened to the last 3 episodes where BlockPay was announcing the pre-ICO, you could have had that. Or somebody generous in the chat here will post a link, and you'd be like, see, if you would have just asked that question, you would have gotten a link. And I'm like, yeah, I'm more at a glance guy. I like to go find the info myself. And if I get it myself easy, then that means that there's other people that can't find it themselves easy. And that's what I think we are going to improve on that, especially when we're all like recognizing that problem right now. So people are saying, well, it's 4 years in for Peercoin. How come Peercoin's doing so horribly on price? And it's simply the network effect and learning how to use it, and the strengths of Peercoin aren't there. Sunny King was never intended to market Peercoin. That's not his job, right? His job is to develop the coin. But he did things that a lot of people didn't understand right away. He put checkpointing in. Everybody's like, oh, forget it. Yep. Checkpointing and Peercoin, that you're doing that so that Sunny King can run off with all the money and just going to fork the chain in one night, and then boom, he's gone. In 4 years, he's never done that, and now he's removed checkpointing. And people will be like, he removed checkpointing. It's like, yeah, it's optional in the protocol now, and soon it's going to actually be taken off completely as a default in the wallet. He only did that because he needed enough people to have Peercoin and for it to be distributed enough before he removed checkpointing to remove attacks. He knew about attacks on day one, and he didn't. And a lot of proof of stake created coins.
Implementing it.
Yeah, there was a lot of proof of stake coins that were released with checkpointing removed for 2 reasons. One reason is because they didn't understand how to checkpoint something on the decentralized chain by signing a checkpoint with their private key. So they're just like, well, I'll just turn checkpointing off. Their blockchains got attacked, forked, double spent, and stopped and halted because of consensus and stuff without checkpointing. And they're like, they came running back and go, how do I restart my chain with checkpointing? And you know what? Late. And as a coin developer, you should know these things, right? There's more to Peercoin that he did in advance for even releasing the coin. And like the way he launched, he talked a little bit about that, doing a 9 days head up. And then he said once released, the chain doesn't start for 5 minutes after the code is released. So everybody has the same opportunity to download and compile it. He did these things so that 4 years later, when we're talking about Peercoin, the history of these things will be like, this is why checkpointing was in. This is why I talked about the coin 9 days in advance before releasing the code. This is why it sat there for 5 minutes. This is why. And then when you go back on the chain, you're like, you know what? It is a fair coin. We didn't know that at the time. We just thought it was just another. It wasn't another coin. And he does things like that way in advance. But going back to what we're initially talking about here, Peercoin's hard to use. I went to Peer4Commit today, which is their little project voting website. I couldn't understand how the coins move or who keeps the coins on for projects that are being thing. I'm very irritated with it, and it's there all along. PBC Man showed it to me all along. It's only now that I wanted to actually use the thing that I'm like, this is complicated still, and we got to fix that.
Yeah, the complications, the problem with, and this is what I keep telling people in terms of blockchain in general right now, is we are a very niche group of people who recognize that the blockchain cannot just be used for transmission of value, but for multiple other things. There are other use cases that are available for this stuff. And the thing is, when you have chains that can be used for more than one thing, it's very difficult then to start teaching people to use them, which is always why I told people that I was against the merger back in the day, because we had all these different DACs that were going to be created that were going to offer one service and one service only, but do it very well. And then they were going to add on new features that other chains could utilize as well because they're open source. So you would essentially see these different, a gaming DAC might have people who are better with user interface stuff. Or a music DAC might get the type of demographic that basically will work for free and help bootstrap their community. There are various attributes that these different use cases bring in terms of the demographics and what they can accomplish for the chain. And I think that the usability stuff, once you have multiple communities focusing on the same problems, that's when you start getting a lot more value for your buck, because that's the power of the open source movement, really, right? That we can scaffold on top of what one another have built. So I do agree with you that BitShares is in many ways, it's too much for the everyday user, because it's just so much more difficult than people are used to for cryptocurrency wallets. But at the same time, I think that it just keeps focusing me back on the fact that what Custom Miner said, we just have to organize something to make it better. And that's, if you guys are interested in ideas that we can discuss on that, please let me know, because I think that we could use Steemit to a degree to help pay for documentation.
I'm very interested in hearing people's thoughts.
What are some solutions to get both better documentation and better usability? I'm going to be quiet and see what people say.
You first, sir. You first.
Oh, I was going to say about the Peercoin celebration that was set up. The things that we had to do is how do you get people involved that traditionally don't get involved to organize things? So
Good
one
question.
thing that PPC Man did was he tapped people individually on the shoulder that he knew that people would do things, and said, would you do this one? And he said, absolutely, for PureCoin, I will do that one thing. Then he found somebody else and said, would you do this one thing? And that person said, absolutely, I will do too. And he didn't have any money to pay anybody. He just says, we're going to do this. But he's found this before, that if he posts something publicly and says, listen, this is what needs to occur, who wants to volunteer for it? And he goes, you hear crickets. And so then if people don't see that they're getting paid for it, they're not going to, they just don't have the time. Everybody's got their own little thing to do, and nobody's got the time to volunteer for free. So they let everybody else do it. And then you get like the core 3 or 4 members that are like so burnt out. However, the anniversary project got pulled off. There was more than 10 people involved, which makes up a group of people. Individually, they were only doing one thing. And then, thanks to Fuzzy, there was a Steemit post announcing about the party. It made almost 600 SED. Fuzzy, as gracious as he was, turned it over to me, and I divvied up and said all 10 people get $60 US. So you didn't know that, and it's yours to do what you want with it. Some people took it, some people donated it to me, some people are wanting to put it towards other projects. But it was nice to know that an unexpected reward happened. So how do we do this? I think we follow that system. We find out who can do what in a very minimal way, get enough people on board that will do one thing each. And then if you hold the coin, obviously you're going to benefit. But there should also be a way for us to generate profit from it too, so that we can all get awarded for our time. And then you'll find people fighting to volunteer and fighting to get involved, because they'll want the unexpected rewards that come afterwards, which could be share bits or whatever, all that kind of stuff.
And additionally, I'm working on code right now as we speak, and one thing I don't have, and it's fucking stupid that I don't have it, is a full list of all the APIs supported by Steam. I mean, the GitHub docs are pathetic. Okay, they're terrible for Steam. And I've actually looked through the source code, because the GitHub repository, Steemit/Steam, says code is documentation, and I looked through the code, and well, apparently I didn't catch all the APIs. So now I've got to restart my Steamd, which those who know that this is dangerous because it loves to blow up. And yeah, it'd be nice to have a list of the APIs.
Well, that goes back into the documentation. And I mean, I try not to always bring BitShares into this. And I'm glad that everybody understands that it's not something that I do all the time, and is really discussing this with us, because it's something that I think, man, as soon as Chris started talking about it last week, I really have not been able to stop thinking about it, because that is one of the number one problems that I think I get for graphene related stuff in general, is that documentation. Because the people who are coding this stuff, they really know what they're doing, and it's easy for them to forget how much others don't know when they're just diving in.
That's right, and I think that's why one of the reasons why Dan Larimer left to go create Steam. He wanted something that was basic. You find a lot of people on there that know how to write stories, but they don't even know how to pull out their SVD. But they'll make a point of learning once they see $1,000 sitting there. Yeah. So, so that kind of works. Steemit works. It's still going through its test. It's still beta. But one of the things that he left BitShares for is he says, listen, this is a technical system for experienced traders that will be able to find their way through it, and this is a technical system that cryptocurrency experts will be able to find their way through it. And the core of the system allows for voting, it allows for witnesses, it allows for all of this. It's up to the community now to be able to twist and turn and manipulate the system based on consensus and voting, and it's all in there. So who's at fault here? It's not Dan Larimer, because he built it, like with everybody else helping him. Now his attitude is the community's got to deal with what I created and get it to the next stage. And if none of us do it, stop blaming me all the time. You stop waiting for me to come back and cheerlead you on. You have a system. It works. Use it.
Yep. I could not say it better myself, man.
Indeed, particularly with 100 witnesses. You know, especially given what the witnesses stand to gain. It's kind of surprising to me that I haven't seen more of a concerted push from the BitShares community. And that's not to say that I'm not very well aware that there are a bunch of people pushing in different ways. I am very well aware of that.
Yeah, but it's just to actually build something that's organized, you require resources if it's on a large level.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And well, I mean, so the witnesses, what they're getting about $200 a month right now, right?
That's probably about right.
And you know, if I'm doing the math right, there's 200 of them. Or sorry, there's 100 of them. Now, $200 a month isn't that much, but $200 a month times 100 is pretty good. And you can develop something with that. So maybe that's something to actually float in the community, is just, hey, witnesses, you want to see this thing take off? Look, you have automated funding. Pool it. Make it take off.
Yeah, good source to draw from.
That goes back to the delegate system, really. Are you guys familiar with the delegate system of BitShares 1.0?
Only tangentially and only because of you. You know, I did use BitShares 1.0 for a while, but not terribly long.
Okay, so with BitShares 1.0, and to my knowledge, this is what Lisk is built off of as well. For BitShares 1.0, you had delegates, and those delegates would have to do things for BitShares to keep their positions. And if there wasn't a whole lot of activity from them, the community would kind of call them out about it, and you would see their ranking go down.
Isn't that
Witnesses
the way
kind of
witnesses are
changed it.
supposed to work in Steam? Or not quite?
Yeah.
Am I not quite getting it?
No, I think that there's an unspoken expectation of that, but it's not a hard set rule. And I think that it should be for all delegate or proof of stake chains. I think that those chains should have kind of like a mission statement and say, this is what the witnesses of this chain will do for the chain. And if they don't, they won't be a witness.
I just came up with a great idea for Peercoin just now, based on what you just said. That
what's up?
Sometimes the rich list don't want to transfer their coins away, but what they could do is with some of the stake coins that they earn, they should attribute some of those stake coins to development for different things, and said, listen, you're staking your wallet, you already hold a crap load of coins. You just 32,000 Peercoin from staking them. Turn that 32,000 Peercoin over to the development for the month of October. And that's going to be a stake month that the rich list, including exchanges who stake, everybody should consider doing that. And then we'll raise like 100,000 Peercoin that we can do something with.
Yeah. I mean, and if you guys have a huge rich list, or rather a concentrated rich list, you're going to have a lot more chance of getting stuff done, because the decentralization factor is another thing that really hurt BitShares, is because the ownership is so decentralized. It's much more difficult to get people working together to get the consensus that is needed to do stuff, especially when it requires dilution.
Yes, you can. There was just a note there in the chat that you can already raise Peercoins through Peer4 commit, and that's true. However, it's more of a passive, hey, if you want to donate something, this is how you can do it, and there's no incentive. So you need a campaign, and once you have a campaign, maybe board commit can actually increase its activity level of October.
That's smart, actually. I mean, I'm really big for the blockchains paying workers. I think that that's a very valuable aspect. The big thing is making sure that the blockchain actually can pay workers, by which I mean you actually have people having the ability to vote for things like that, or to become part of a group that pays toward stuff like that to be done. Because let's face it, the people who are the biggest whales have the most to lose and the most to gain, so they have an incentive to do that stuff.
One of the things I'm going to be doing is I'm going to actually be more involved in BitShares. I've been trying to get to Dolphin Stage on Steemit. It's not working out very well, so I'm going to be focusing more attention on BitShares, which is probably a bigger chance for me to go somewhere.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. If you're on Steemit and you're posting stuff about Peercoin or any of the other cryptocurrency projects, I mean, I know that you guys are doing good stuff, and I have no problem upvoting. I mean, you can ask the Gridcoin community. I upvote pretty much everything that they produce because most of it's all good.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're getting paid. I mean, it's probably not as much as it could be if I was a huge super whale, but I mean, it's something that they probably wouldn't get paid otherwise, and they're utilizing it. I mean, it's something that is there for you, bro, if you want it. The thing that I see with Steem, more than me seeing Steem as a way where I can go on and upvote stuff, and I find the best of the best of everything. Rather than doing that, I consider it more a guild of people who are doing stuff in the space, who are actually doers, and who are out in the arena, and bringing them into a place where they can actually, kind of get some support for what they're doing for once. And if we do that, then essentially, you can create a guild where, hey, you guys will upvote me because you know that I'm not intentionally going to screw the system and that I'm trying to always bring value. And I will always upvote you guys because I know that too. And now if somebody in our little ecosystem goes, oh my God, and tell a guy just wrote this post and, he took a picture of his butt and, and I'll go, I would probably laugh. But I'd probably ask if somebody painted a Peercoin on it. But but my point is, like, if it's against the rules of our little content creation guild, then somebody can risk getting kicked out of that content creation guild. So I see that as kind of like the way to move forward with Steemit scaling, and making it so all these different guilds can quote unquote exist and compete against one another and work together.
Definitely.
I think there needs to be a way for there to be flash teams where you can get on Steemit and hook up with people just temporarily, so you can start having a reputation and history and find out who is good to work with. So a portal to something like that, a Steemit front end that allowed people to, instead of just curating manually, to curate as part of a little team, I think would be a good idea.
Bingo. Well, that's a very similar idea, isn't it? It's just a little bit more micro version of it.
I fully agree with Brindle Swan just said. I'll give you an example of that. There's sometimes I write a post on Steemit and it goes nowhere, and I know that later on people update and talk about it and comment on it, 7 days after. So Dan's idea of that was, well, we'll give it 30-day payout. But somebody sees a post that's like 14 days old or something, the experienced users would be like, yeah, my curation reward for that is going to be very tiny. There's no point in upvoting it. I'll just consume the information. But with that said, there's days where I take a couple days off in real life and I go do family things, and I come back and I'm like, oh, darn, look at that. I just wrote a couple of dynamite posts and there was a couple of mumble posts. I didn't even get a chance to read them, up them, or anything. I'm a little late to the game and I feel terrible. And then when my posts don't get upvoted, I mean, you're probably doing the exact same thing, but this flash mob type concept or something, or for organized campaigns, and that's important. So yeah, we definitely have to have that.
Well, I'll tell you, just for anybody who has problems getting upvotes from me, I'll tell you right now why it is. I'm busy with 2 different projects, trying to get both of them done. And in addition, I have to try to curate. So I've tried to actually stick to mostly people who are under the Beyond Bitcoin tag or add the Beyond Bitcoin tag, just because it simplifies things so much for me. Because if I know that somebody is adding the Beyond Bitcoin tag and they're talking about other cryptocurrencies, that they're people who are representing another community. So that right there to me means that they should get an upvote. Now the question is, and this is, I still have to take time with this. Even with curating that tag, I go and look at it, and there are people who post shit posts about a different cryptocurrency. They use these pumping tactics and things like that, and I might give a slight upvote and say, try to actually provide valuable information for people instead of just saying it's going to go through the roof. You know what I mean? But I'm having to do all those things without the tools that are needed yet. So I'm feeling difficult it is to actually give a shit about curating, but knowing that I have all these other things that I have to get done, and people who I'm trying to work with to get them done and get things done that they need me to do so they can get things done, and then in addition to all that, we have, we're in an environment that's constantly changing too. So I do want to let you know that if those upvotes are not coming, if you think that I'm missing you and you're writing really good stuff, please consider adding that tag. And I really mean it. Like, I will go through and look at other stuff on Steam sometimes, but it's not something I have the time to, I don't have time to dig into all of the stuff. Like, I didn't have time for the Firstican thing. I didn't have time for between him and Tuck, but I tried to get in there and tell them both to chill and stuff. But I mean, there's at one point on what I can work on and try to build value. But yeah, I mean, long-winded explanation, but I did want to kind of explain it to you because it makes it easier on me, man. It really does. And that's one of the reasons why I'm actually working with Fadat, and I want to talk to you, Fadat, about talking with Jesta as well, because some of these solutions.
Yeah, well, so he and I have talked pretty extensively.
I mean to. I don't mean to interrupt. I just need a point of clarification. Sure. Are we still on the live show, or is this the after show?
I don't think there's a difference. Exactly.
Well, I haven't ended it officially, but it doesn't really matter. I can end it in the edit whenever I want to.
Okay, perfect.
But if you guys want, we can add it.
After party now.
Before you do, I do have a point of clarification that should make it into the live show. So go to me before you call it. And with that said, go back for that and say what you're going to say.
Kind of forget. So go to you. Finish your thing up, and then we'll do our other thing. Yeah.
Sorry, I because there's one thing I want to insert before we hit that is Gridcoin came on during the Purecoin party or whatever and made one of the principal persons said proof of stake means the rich richer, and that is tabooest myth that ever needs to be said for proof of stake. That's not necessarily true. There's a whole wiki article based on that, and they said a lot of the members in Purecoin said, well, why didn't somebody stop him when he said that and clarify that? And my attitude is, well, first of all, you're listening to the archive, so you should be present for these shows and volunteer to speak as well, right? So you can't expect other people to make clarifications like that. But I just wanted to clarify that proof of stake does not mean that the rich get richer. It seems like it does. I don't have the reference.
I can hear him fine.
Okay. I was just saying, when it comes to proof of stake, it does not necessarily the rich get richer. Everyone gets richer through a proof of stake. It's just based on your holdings. So if you put a lot in, you get richer. If you put a little in, you're not going to get richer more than somebody that put a lot more in.
But you're risking more just everyone if you have a lot of stake.
Together earns 1%. That's right, and that's just the way the world works, isn't it? I mean, you show me like in the stock market where somebody buys a lot of stock and they don't get richer based on they bought a lot of stock versus somebody that bought a little bit of stock. It's the same concept. What you put in life or what you put in financially is what you reap back. Right. So stop saying the rich get richer. That's like a go oh, forget it then. The rich get richer, and they just write off with that and walk away. That's a misnomer. And they were surprised that proof of Gridcoin, who is built basically on proof of stake system, would even condone that type of myth. So no offense to them, but that needs to be cleared up, and I'd like that to be made in the live show.
Well, and to be clear, that's not the entire Gridcoin community who said that, but one person from the Gridcoin community or who was attending that hangout, right?
That's a good point.
Well, it's just a point that we all have to remind. I have to remind myself of it. I mean, just little things like people. The thing that's difficult with cryptocurrency is if you choose to represent a cryptocurrency, guess what? You represent it. You give it its public image because no one else in their right mind is going to do it for free. So if you want to, you are going to be able to do it in general. And whether you want to make a good face for that public face or a crappy one is up to you, but you're going to give people an impression of that crypto community. You know, so I've often thought to myself, man, if you wanted to be a terrible person to a crypto community, you go in and you create your own, hangout series for them, and you just be a complete asshole. Of course, you never know. You might end up getting like a cult following and become extremely popular. But my point is, you want to put on the best face that you possibly can. You want to do good things. You don't want to, cause problems and spread FUD, because guess what? Trust in this space is the gold, right? That's the gold that backs the value of all blockchains. And if you don't have, and I hate to say that, they say that these are trustless systems, but let's face it, they're not devoid of trust. And we really don't want them to completely be devoid of trust in every way, shape, and form. Because humans and the way that we use this technology is going to be how we build the future. So do we want to dislocate humans from that equation? I don't think so. So, trust is always going to be a very important, if not under covered aspect of blockchain technology. And you have these communities that bring real value and do, overall do good and represent the community at large in the best way they can. And, you're going to see benefits from it, but it works both ways.
One thing that I want to implore all Mumble listeners for Beyond Bitcoin show, when you're listening to archives such as this one, what I think you should do, or I recommend you do, is take notes on things that were not said, or different subjects that we could have explored more on, or a new viewpoint that you have. Make arrangements to attend one of these, and then that way you got like a footnote list of 5 or 6 items you'd like to discuss or clarify, and then that way we get into the next archive for other people to hear. Don't let just the same 7 or 8 people say things, and then you sit there in the background listening to the session, because I used to do that. That's how I actually got here. Is I used to listen to the same 7 or 8 people go back and forth, and I'd hear the good points. I'd hear the good points, and then I would sit there and I would go, geez, I wish somebody would have brought this up, and I wish somebody would have brought that up, and how come he didn't say something about this? And then I realized, well, if I'm the one thinking that, I better get in here and do it.
You have to think
so
it.
That's how I got here.
You have to say it out loud because no one else is reading your damn mind. It's so true.
Participation's important.
Yeah, well, and that's, I'm just so glad to see that people are starting to recognize that from other communities already. And it's funny because I think of Peercoin and Gridcoin as two of the ones that are the closest at shares in terms of the ways that they think about things. I mean, for instance, proof of stake was a ballsy move, to say the least, by Sonny and the crew. And delegated proof of stake equally was a ballsy move. To build on top of something that was already a ballsy move, it kind of, makes, it just invites FUD. And that's what happened. And then Gridcoin, you have, sure, they've got proof of work in there, and they've also got proof of stake But in addition to all of that, they've been thinking in terms of all these different use cases for the blockchain for quite some time as well. So I think that there's a lot to be. I think there are a lot of other communities that could benefit from this as well, though. So I will say that, and this is a good time to let everybody know, if you guys know of communities that would work well with your community that you're promoting, or things like that, ask them to consider RSVPing to join us for a hangout, but also ask them to consider having their own community hangouts and posting them with the Beyond Bitcoin tag, because those hangouts are the ones that I really want to start upvoting eventually, because those are the ones that I want to support that as much as possible, because if every different crypto community has these different hangouts, then we can do some amazing stuff, and we can actually start working together in some very deep and real ways. I mean, we're what, 9 years into cryptocurrency now? The next 9 to 10 years are going to be even more crazy than the past 9 years have been. So, I think it's time for us to all start converging and working together. Regardless of the platform, whether it's Discord, TeamSpeak, any of this stuff, use the tools that you want to use. Just post the dang stuff and say that we're part of the Beyond Bitcoin movement, so I can upvote it and keep track of all of it and follow the people who are doing big stuff, so I can make sure that I can take care of those people who are sacrificing and busting their butts for their communities. So I just want to let you guys all know about, make sure to ask people and direct people to the RSVP threads, and make sure that you also, if you refer somebody, that you take credit for that, so I can give out, because what I do from the RSVP thread is I pay out to the people who joined as guest speakers and or the people who referred them. So just a consideration, and these are things that you guys can do. And for those who hold their own community hangouts, over time they're going to have a very high chance of getting top positions in these hangouts as well. So it's just to think about. To ask you guys to consider participating in. Week is going to be $600 or 600 Steam-backed dollars. Well, actually, no, because we get half that we can give out. So that would be probably about 320. So what? That's divided by 4. That would be, divided by 3 this week would be what? 120 SPD to each guest speaker. So just something to keep in mind, guys. Now, with that said, does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up, or should I consider this hangout to be over? This is a long one.
Anybody doing development in Golang on? Because, man, I'm trying. I want to build or has anybody done an ingester? The component that would read from the blockchain block by block by block and throw those fuckers into a database. In this case, Rethink DB, but it doesn't really matter what database, just the ingester. Yes, the ingester.
I don't know. Is anybody here working on Steam other than for that right now? By working on it, I mean coding it.
Oh, okay. All right, well, no problem. It's esoteric anyway.
I know that the Bitcoin community was considered, somebody was trying to create a Go wallet for that, and it's the first time I heard about Go at that respect. So apparently Go is becoming really popular now.
Go is fantastic. There are a lot of reasons it's fantastic, but I really do like it, because it's just, the static binaries alone, good lord, it saves so much time.
Hello.
I was just doing some reading on...
Are you doing some reading on what?
I was just, Custom Miner is going to say something. Go ahead.
No, nothing.
Well, we hope you do. What's up, Custom Miner? You don't happen to be one of the dudes with the GPU miners, do you?
Yeah. In the Boink hardware porn thread, 2 of my rigs have got 6 graphics cards each, but that's dismantled now. That's where my name came from.
Gotcha. Hey, that's too bad it's dismantled. I bet it was fun.
It was good fun.
I was doing some research on the CompuMate that was risen up here in chat by G-Check that somebody the Mars resident is talking about it on Steam as well as on BitShares Talk. And apparently it's a 10-year-old project, and it has to do with reward cards or something. I'm finding out, but it didn't actually go anywhere. So, or it's still in progress, and that would make a great vote up as long as they can get enough people to RSVP it for next time. So somebody's got to rally together a group, much like we did with Beercoin, to get on.
Yeah, I think that you're going to see these different communities that do this over time. They're going to just, especially the ones who have their own hangouts, they're just going to destroy on these things. They're just going to get in here whenever they want to. And at least until you've got like 5 or 6 of them, which will happen. But even with that, you'll find them probably saying, hey, this week I don't have that big of a deal. Can you lobby a little bit less for your product, for your project? I think hopefully we'll see that. If not, we might have to look at stuff in the future. But it's going to be very valuable to lobby and bring people onto these things.
I was thinking about this the other day. Like, say this whole Mumble conference thing gets really popular, and we have like 10 plus people trying to get their points across. Perhaps we could have like a fast talking round where you've only got like a couple minutes to get your pitch out there. Then after that fast talking round, you go to like a longer, discussion phase.
That's a good idea.
That's a really good idea.
This is why, I have such a hard time understanding why people are so intent on, competing when they can instead collaborate. Because, if I'm fighting against you, instead of utilizing both of our skill sets to amplify each other, I feel like I might be being a little bit of an idiot. At least if I agree with you as a person being like, I could see if I'm like, oh my God, this guy's like the next Hitler. I might decide to distance myself. But in the case that somebody's doing something really good, or they're, and they're busting their butts to do that stuff, why not work together in these ways? And it seems common sense to some people, but to others it doesn't. And it's, it's very interesting to see that little social dynamic. But I guess what is the most interesting to see is whenever I end up meeting these people like you, CM, honestly, Custom Miner, who recognize this stuff on the surface, and I don't even need to explain it, because this is how that stuff grows, man, and everybody who participates is uplifted. It's so much harder, and we all get better from learning from each other. No, Fadat, you should speak above me, because otherwise I won't shut up.
Oh, no worries. It was a stupid question, actually. But does anybody else go through multiple keyboards a year?
When I spill juice on them, yeah.
No, but I will say that wireless keyboards apparently are being hacked now.
Ooh, fun.
Hey, I'm at compumatrix.co, and it is a BitShares clone. It looks like it's a web wallet for BitShares, compumatrix.co.
Really? Somebody cloned or forked BitShares?
I think it looks like it's going into the BitShares blockchain, so I think it's just a web interface to it, like OpenLedger.
Oh, weird.
Compumatrix.co?
Compumatrix.co. And a reason people don't cooperate is that there are psychopaths out there, and you get burned. So, for example, I met a fellow in April who wanted to make a Sharia-compliant crypto. And I just mentioned BitShares to him, and I just said, well, whatever you're going to do, you want to use the BitShares toolkit. And on last week's Mumble session, I think it was Once Upon a Time, I'm not sure, somebody said, hey, there's a fork of BitShares E-Dinar, E-D-I-N-A-R coin. And sure enough, that's another fork of BitShares, except it looks scammy. And I emailed the guy and say, hey, maybe we could consult a little bit more, maybe a paid consult instead of the free one. But, what are you doing with that? But I didn't hear back from him. I don't know if it's a scam, but it looks pretty, looks interesting, but it looks scammy.
Regarding that topic of, that kind of requirement that certain people would require, I dug into it quite extensively, and apparently you're not allowed to have
damn
interest.
Interesting, isn't it?
you're not allowed to have interest
It's brilliant, actually.
on like if you give your money to like a bank and they're not allowed to give interest for that, but like with proof of stake, I don't think it would apply because you're giving interest from yourself, you know, like when you create the blocks. There's no one, you know, giving interest for holding your money. So it might, you know, be a loophole entirely with proof of stake.
Good point.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's a completely different system from what I've seen. And it's interesting because if you are part of that system, then apparently you don't pay interest either on anything. It's very interesting how that system works. But blockchain technology can be used to provide that flexibility. It's just, yeah, that'll be interesting. I don't know, man. But I am looking at compumatrix.co, and yeah, it looks like they've got a troll box and everything here.
One of the interesting things that I think we're going to foresee in the next months, maybe year at the most, is proof of reputation. Actually, it means tons to the cryptocurrency industry
I
as
agree
a
with
whole.
you.
I was thinking that for Steam, we could use a feature called commitments, where Fuzzy, you've made commitments about what you're going to do with payouts. I've made those commitments, and sometimes you go back and you prove that you made the commitments. I paid Larkin Rose 2/3 as one of my early posts on him, and it'd be nice if that were automated, if that were easy to do, if you had
That would be cool.
Yeah, and that would be a good way to build reputation if you could show commitments and proof of having lived up to the commitments.
That's actually a great use case for this, because if people say that you lived up to the commitment or not, you know, there's even a record of why people say you didn't. So people can go through and see a pattern if there is, you know, a consistent problem with somebody.
There's a lot of development on Steam that hasn't made it into a hard fork yet, and I do remember reading something about that for transferring funds between users and transferring it to a pool account or something like that. I'll grab the commit, but I was reading about that. I'm like, wow, so they're really concentrating on something like that to occur. I'll have to find a link for it.
I think Xerox's new toolkit allows for multi-signature accounts finally.
Yeah, Xerox continues working on this stuff, man. He's nonstop, man. Really. They're also looking at going
Frankly, very
to
impressive developer, that Xerox.
Yeah, him and SVK and Cass are planning on going to the Trezor hackathon to try to get BitShares and graphene chains like Steam and Peerplays on Trezor wallets.
That's pretty cool. I can't say I've been all that interested with Trezor, but that's okay. It must do something for somebody, somehow.
Oh, I think it's a great idea overall. I think for my, for the everyday user right now, it's probably one of the easiest ways of holding a crypto safely. But, I mean, obviously you can always be better.
How many people buy those and then fuck themselves over, though? Serious question. Like how often
I don't know.
Happen? Oh, okay.
I've had one for a couple years. I just haven't used Bitcoin in so long. But it was definitely great and safe and nice device for use with Bitcoin. I posted a link to something called the Case Wallet, which has a built-in GSM chip that you pay for from the start. It doesn't require a phone, and it's more expensive, but it's an interesting one that doesn't really have any traction. But if you go to that website and you look at that device and you look at that keypad, I have a way to make that keypad something that you can type on at 50 words a minute with one hand, the same hand you hold it with. And I would love to get a hold of these people and repurpose that device to be a universal keyboard and mouse, in addition to being a hardware wallet with a GSM chip. And then if it had encrypted messaging, that would be a killer hardware.
Oh, Jesus. That's amazing, Brindle.
Go over that again, man, and send links if you don't mind.
Well, I sent the link to choosecase.com, and what the Case Wallet is.
I see it there now.
Okay, So the picture has it with a phone scanning a QR code, but it doesn't need a phone to work. It actually has a GSM chip built in, kind of think like Kindles or e-readers that you pay for. When you pay for it, you get lifetime service in all these countries. So it is open source, and it's an interesting device in its own. And just with my background in wearable computing and one-handed keyboards, I just see an added killer app to add to it, which is if you made it a universal keyboard and mouse that you could type super fast with and send secure notes back and forth. In addition
who are you? And can you tell me about your background in wearable computing and one-handed keyboards?
I guess it's the after party. I do have one post on Steemit, Forgotten History of Wearable Computing. I guess I'll post a link to that in a little bit. But my name is Doug Platt, and if you Google that in quotes with wearable computing, I developed HIP PC in the early 90s, which was kind of used a heads-up display called the Private Eye, which is kind of the father of Google Glass, except it did not have a camera. My wearables never had cameras, so they didn't creep people out. What they did feature was what's called a chord keyboard. It's a way of typing fast with one hand, kind of like playing a flute. And when you have a full-featured... Yeah?
You're that guy, yes?
I'm one of those guys. Thad Starner has kind of... he's at Google Glass now. He got his motivation from seeing a talk I gave at MIT. I was invited to speak at MIT by Marvin Minsky, and so I'm one of those guys anyway.
Well, hell yeah, that's cool. So
you sound like
I do hardware dev
in
addition to the software dev.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I do hardware dev in addition to the software dev, and my eventual I want to make a mobile phone because they all suck right now. And I think it's actually, I'm leaning toward the suckness coming from the software end of things. Hardware is cheap and plentiful. Now, there's some issues with the hardware, but the issues with the hardware are all software. You see, all the hardware is built in China, all of it. And you cannot do software in China because Great Firewall of Doom. And so, well, I'm hoping to figure out a way to, and this is a long-term thing, mind you, because, hardware, to put together a lab where hardware and software development in parallel properly and crack some of these issues because they sure need cracking.
Well, it's interesting to see that you guys are both interested in very similar things. And when I listen to it, it's kind of cool because when you think about it, this is exactly what this is here for. You never know who you're going to connect up with and what their background is. And I know Brindle's been doing some amazing stuff for a long time in the wearable devices, but I learned today a little bit deeper into that little history.
So, Fadat, you're in Vietnam?
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely correct.
All right, so I'll contact you via your email at your website.
All right, awesome. Hey, thanks, man. Oh, wait. At Cloudery?
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Oh, okay. Please do contact me via fadat@gmail.com, just because that way you'll also get Hangouts, Google Hangouts, and that's just what I tend to use for instant messages.
Great. Definitely will do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, I just want to thank everybody for showing up today. We are at a very, very long hangout today, but I did want to kind of sit around with everybody and chat about some stuff beyond what the normal hangout does and really just talk about BitShares a little bit too, which was a big focus that we never really hit head on. And since I do a lot of the stuff that I do for BitShares to a large degree, and no one is misguided about that fact, I did want to bring it up a little bit toward the end and maybe as the after party discussion. But please consider supporting everything we're doing, and we're going to continue building tools to support what you guys are doing. So thank you for attending, and we'll see you guys here next week.
See you then, sir.
La 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 la.